Folks, let's kick this night off, okay? Yesterday was already information overload. The good news is it wasn't so much information overload in regard to actual licensing topics or in actual testable topics. We scratched the surface on some, but I told you it wasn't the real lecture, if you will, on these licensing categories, these terminologies, these verbiages. So we're going to get into that a little bit more today. But what we did talk about was, the test and the unique scenario y'all are in where the test is changing. And you'll have more information on that hopefully next week. And we will make sure that you are very well prepared. The other things we got into was the licensing process, the background check, some administrative things. And so the first real lesson that we got into was, and I want to make sure that you understand this, this is really and truthfully a North Carolina specific concept about who needs a license. And I'll tell you why. Every state changes this criteria. Every state is slightly different. So this is actually a North Carolina specific thing. You are not going to be asked super specific questions on the national on, well, who needs a license? Okay. I mean, if you get asked anything like that on the national side, it's going to be a general brokerage question about being a licensee or doing real estate, but it's not going to get into the super specifics. And I'll give you a really perfect example of this. We're going to get into different categories today of exemptions, meaning people who don't need a license. We're also going to give you a couple practice examples to make sure that you understand that in North Carolina, these three categories that I've been teaching you already are the criteria. And if one's missing, you probably don't need a license. But let me tell you a funny story to help you understand this concept. Folks, I have a license in North Carolina, and I have a license in Colorado. Now, here's the funny story. Just like Ohio, I have never been to Colorado in my life. And so you might be wondering, well, Seth, that seems silly. Why do you have a Colorado broker's license if you've never been to Colorado? And I will tell you why. Because I am a nerd, and I love education, and I'm cocky. And so as an educator, one day I went to my computer and I typed in hardest real estate broker's license. And I half expected for it to be North Carolina because of how hard our stuff is. It was not. It was Colorado. Colorado has over 200 hours of class required to get your license. You only have a minimum of 75. And with the test and everything, your course will end up being closer to 80. So we actually go above the minimum. And so because I've been licensed in North Carolina, Colorado afforded me the opportunity to get a license there without having to take the class. And so me being the cocky instructor that I am, I signed up for the test and I took it. And it was a bifurcated exam, meaning two parts, a national and a state, just like you folks are going to experience. Well, folks, I didn't look a single bit into the actual Colorado laws. And as you might imagine, I aced the national portion. I think I got one or two wrong. And that was just because of verbiage differentiation from, state to state. But on the Colorado portion of the licensing exam, you had to get like a 72.5 to pass. I got like a 73.2. So I passed, but barely. So it was only by sheer test-taking ability that I was able to pass that because our laws and rules are so stinking different from state to state. And I'll give you one really prevalent real-world example. In North Carolina, you cannot go and hold an open house. If you don't know what an open house is, I'll explain that more in a second. You can't hold an open house unless you're a real estate broker. In Colorado, an unlicensed assistant of a broker can hold an open house. Huge difference. So you see what I'm telling you? This is not a national topic. It would be impossible for them to test you on all the categories of who needs a license on a national point of view. So it is just state level. When we are dealing with who needs a license, who doesn't need a license, that's going to be very heavily testable on the state portion. You'll get general agency and brokerage questions on the national, which we will talk about way more. Everybody comfortable with what I'm saying? What we're teaching you now, state specific. So Yesterday, we gave you this fun-filled little acronym, and that acronym was LL Beans, and then we further went on to say dealing with real property for others for compensation. And so LL Beans has an S, just like the clothing company, but with an S. If you list, lease, buy, exchange, auction, negotiate, sell, or refer to do that, right? Do it, offer to do it, or refer to do it. And it deals with specifically real property for others for compensation. A license is required. Now, you have to think about both of them simultaneously, because if you help somebody list their car for sale, I told you that yesterday, there's no license required for that. If you help somebody list their goldfish for sale, there's no license for that. If you help somebody sell banana bread, there's no license for that. So it is any of these activities dealing with real property for others for compensation. Now, for all intents and purposes right now, just think of real property as real estate, because that's probably not the most common term that you've heard it referred to as, right? You more often hear the word real estate. In a little bit, I'm going to explain to you the difference between the technical differences between the term land, real estate, and real property. But you should be comfortable with that term real property, okay? Now, I also warned you that this does include referrals. So I'm going to give you a few examples of this as we go along. But as you look at this picture, notice how I have it pieced together as a puzzle. Only if you can make this puzzle is a license required. If you are missing a piece, then you cannot complete it. And that means no license is required. And if you're anything like the rest of the world, it's going to infuriate you, right? Don't you hate that when you put a puzzle together and then somewhere in the midst of the puzzle, that piece gets lost? If you have kids or pets, you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, and you get to actually make puzzles, good on you, right? I'm happy for you. So if any piece is missing, no license is required. So if I wanted to sell my own house without a license, I could. It's real property. I'm making money. It's not for others. Missing that piece. If I wanted to help Justin buy a house without a license, I could. As long as I'm not getting paid. It's real property. Justin is somebody other than me. But if he's not paying me, I don't need a license. If I wanted to help Monica manage her rental property, because Monica and I are besties for the resties, okay? I can do that if I'm not getting any compensation. Yet again, real property for somebody other than myself, but there's nothing of value. All three have to be present. And the way that they're going to test you on this is they're going to give you different scenarios. And they're going to say, oh, well, this and this and this is a license required. And they're going to try to trick you. But then you've got to just apply these three criteria every single time to determine, is there a license required or is it not? Now, there are 7-ish, I believe it's 7, named licensing exemptions under North Carolina License on Commission rule that are going to be direct exemptions. And so you may have certain scenarios that don't necessarily beautifully fit this mold, and those would have to fall under these exemption criteria that we're going to talk about in a moment. So in North Carolina, if you're working for yourself, you don't need a license. If you're working for others and not getting paid, you don't need a license. If you're working for somebody other than yourself, dealing with real estate, and there is money being exchanged, a license is required. So I want you to take everything that I just told you at absolute face value. And I want you to look at this scenario. Steve knows his brother is interested in purchasing a new home and sends him to an active real estate broker who will represent his brother in the purchase. Upon closing, the broker sends Steve a $100 Visa gift card. Would this be acceptable without a license, or would a license be required?
You need a license.
You need a license. You need a license. Because, and this is where people get confused. Steve referred somebody to one of the LL Beans activities, right? Buy. So Steve referred somebody to buy. It's an LL Beans activity. Real estate. It's not him, and he was getting compensated for it. A license would be required. If Steve was to accept this compensation, that would be a legal brokerage activity. How about this one? Susan manages a house she owns and books all the tenants and negotiates the rent amounts. She saves a lot of money managing it herself. Is this okay?
Yes, she don't need no license.
Yeah. Susan manages a house she owns. So it is real estate. She is making money by saving all that money, right? But it's not for others. No license is required. Now, I told you there are a lot of named exemptions in North Carolina. And this is where, in just a second, I will give you an introduction to the License Law and Commission Rulebook. So, if you look in the License Law and Commission Rulebook, one of the first exemptions named, it's one of the most confusing, but I'm going to help you understand it right now. Okay? W-2 salaried employees who are employed by an entity owner of the real estate. Well, let's just use Microsoft as an example, folks. Do you think, number one, do you know what Microsoft is, right? Everybody is okay with the fact that Microsoft is an IT company? You're cool with that? Okay. So do you think Microsoft, the IT company, owns real estate? Sure. I would wager it's probably a very good bet that they own real estate, right? They probably have a couple high rises. They probably have a couple investment properties, some long-term holdings. They probably have some, houses that are, for their executive managers. They probably have a lot of real estate if I had to guess. Now, in those exemptions that we've already talked about, meaning the criteria where a piece is missing, real property for others for compensation. So you don't need a license to sell it for yourself. And so here's the question I'm going to ask you. Who is Microsoft?
An entity.
It is an entity.
It's a business entity?
Yep. So let me rephrase my question. Who's going to sell the real estate owned by Microsoft?
One of their employees. Possibly.
One of their employees.
A broker?
Well, I understand they have every right to hire a broker, but in this circumstance, we're trying to figure out when they wouldn't need a broker. And so this is a very important distinction you have to make because it is actually quite testable. And I'm trying to figure out where I want these where I don't look crazy. Because listen, okay, I just want you to know that whenever I record this and I put it up for y'all to watch later, don't judge me for the placement of these because I don't want them on my ears. It hurts and I'm not using them and I don't want to hold them the entire class. So, okay, when I look crazy on the video, y'all just mind your business, all right? So let's talk about Microsoft, all right? If we're dealing with Microsoft, as we keep saying, there is no person that is Microsoft. There's not. And so if I say, yeah, well, an owner can sell their own property, Microsoft is this fictitious concept that we all just understand exists because there is a set of documents that say they exist. And so what that means is anybody who is a salary, hourly employee of Microsoft or a manager or an owner of Microsoft could, in theory, go out, put the sign in the yard, show the home to prospective buyers, and negotiate with those prospective buyers without a license because it's not for others. It is Microsoft doing things for Microsoft. Does that make sense for everybody? But here's where students have a tendency to get, hold on for a second. Here's where students have a tendency to get confused. Folks, a business can't do anything without the employees that do the things. So it would be impossible for Microsoft to actually sell a house. There's no such thing. We just accept that there's a thing. So only somebody who works for Microsoft, a person who works for Microsoft would have to go out and actually sell the house. And the reason why this is a named exemption is because I want you to think of you. Your heart, your liver, your kidneys, all of these things are part of you, but I would never go up to you and say, Adriana's kidneys, unless I'm on the black market, right? I'm like, Adriana's got good kidneys, wait for it, we're just going to take them, right? I'm not going to talk about your kidneys, I'm not going to talk, they're all part of you. And so when we're dealing with a business, every employee, every manager, all of these people are Microsoft. And so I want you to understand what I'm telling you, and then I'm going to tell you why this is so important on the test. If Microsoft wanted to, they could walk into the company cafeteria and they could look at the dishwasher and they could say, hey, Steve, stop washing dishes. We need you to go sell our big high-rise building in New York. And no license needed because he is Microsoft. Is everybody tracking with me here? The reason why this is important, because do not ever get it confused and think that anybody can do that. Corey, if you called somebody and asked them to help you sell your house, let's say that you called Manoj, okay? Corey, can we all agree that Manoj is not Corey? Corey is not Manoj. There is no confusion there that y'all are two different people. So do you see the difference? An owner cannot hire somebody to sell their house. An owner cannot hire somebody to manage their property. Because if they do, that person needs a license. But because Microsoft has already hired somebody who is an extension of themselves, it basically falls under the same exemption of an owner selling for themselves. Does that make sense? What you got, Sam? Oh, hold on. Am I lagging or are you lagging? I can't hear you for some reason.
She's lagging. It's not you.
Okay, so yeah, I heard Jacob.
He's lagging, unfortunately.
Who's lagging? I'm not lagging. You're lagging. Don't you call me lagging. I'm kidding. I'm sorry, Sam. You put it in the chat. I was expecting you to unmute. Is this state specific? Yes, this is all state specific. Folks, let me show you something really cool real quick, and then I'll circle back around. I'm sorry, Sam. Yeah, it's state specific, but let me show you this. Let me pull up my little browser window here. And then I'll get everybody's questions here. Because I'm going to be honest with you, this is extremely testable. And I would wager that with the addition of some of these North Carolina specific questions, that it's going to be even more and more and more of these. Actually, Tim, this is going to take me a second to pull this up. So you go ahead and ask your question. I'll show you this as it pulls up.
Okay, my question is, me as a licensed home builder here in North Carolina, and I do have a corporation, so do I still need to have a license? Or, because when I'm building these homes are actually my homes. And the people that I hire to sell my homes are representing my corporation. So do I still need to have a real estate licensed person, or do I need to hold a license?
Yep. So that's an excellent question. So folks, this is a fantastic question. We're actually about to do this exact example. So here's Tim's question. Tim's question is, okay, well, I build homes and then I hire people on behalf of my corporation to sell these homes. Now, this is what you have to understand. Like, this is such the specific piece of this, okay? It's not enough to have a corporation. The important thing is that the home is deeded to the corporation, because it has to be the entity owns it, an employee of that entity is selling it. And so understand, if I own a house and you look on the deed and it says Seth Chauncey, but I have an investment LLC and I try to hire Kingsley under my investment LLC to sell my property, that'd be illegal without Kingsley having a license, because it's not this magical pass-through thing. It's who owns it. Well, Seth Chauncey owns it. I just happen to also own an LLC. We have a problem. But if Awesome Investments LLC is the owner, I could hire Kingsley as an employee, a W-2 employee of Awesome Investments LLC, and he could go out and sell my house without the need for a license, which is why, folks, Jacob can sell houses. Jacob is not a licensed real estate broker. That's why he's in here. Now, I don't know what your job is per se, Jacob, but that's...
I can't sell houses yet, I don't think.
So you could if your builder wanted to operate that way. Now, folks, understand the double-edged sword here. Jacob works for Eastwood Builders. If they wanted to, Jacob could be a formal employee of Eastwood Builders, And as long as he was W-2 and they paid his taxes and they treated him as W-2 and he went through all the hoops in North Carolina, he could be paid as an employee and sell their houses. But when you're doing that, it's all or nothing. Okay, it's all or nothing. You can't half treat them as an employee. So some builders do not like to have that structure because then they have to pay employment insurance and taxes and all these different things. And so they like brokers because brokers are independent contractors. So you could, in theory, do it if Eastwood Builders wanted to operate that way. The other specific is Eastwood Homes would have to also own the property. If they've got any secondary investment companies that are owning it in the intermediary, it wouldn't work. So there's probably a reason why.
That's my question, because I feel like that's kind of the big thing, right? Is does Eastwood Home or did Eastwood take out if their lots or whatever that they have are investments that they don't necessarily technically own?
And that changes things.
So,
And so understand, Jacob, most builders elect to utilize brokers, not employees. Although some have started, so either is acceptable, and that's where you got to be very careful on the test questions. Because if you are an employee of a builder and the builder owns the real estate being sold, folks, you're the builder for all intents and purposes, right? Because there is no one person that is ABC Builders Incorporated. And I actually have a couple examples that are coming up. So you're already asking fantastic questions. Now let me show you this. This is North Carolina specific. Here's a North Carolina License on Commission Rule Book. I'm going to show you one of the reasons why you don't want to read this book verbatim and back to front, front to back. It is a very important book, but watch this. You know what I've been teaching you about LL Bean's Real Property for Others for Compensation? You want to see how convoluted it is in teaching it to you in this book? If you go under 93A-2, which is right here, definitions and exceptions, and I'll zoom in a little bit when we get to it. Oh, you know what? Let me do this real quick so I don't forget. Make sure I'm recording here. I've got all the video done, but I like to record the slides too so I can just overlay them faster. There we go.
Recording in progress.
All right, everybody, get on your best behavior. I'm just kidding. So if you look right here, a real estate broker within the meaning of this chapter is any person, partnership, corporation, limited liability company, association, or other business entity who, for a compensation or valuable consideration to or promise thereof, lists or offers to list, sells or offers to sell, buys or offers to buy, auctions or offers to auction, specifically not including a mere cry of sales, or negotiates the purchase or sale or exchange of real estate, or who leases or offers to lease, or who sells or offers to sell leases of whatever character, or rents or offers to rent any real estate or that improvement thereon for others. Folks, isn't that a convoluted way of saying LL Beans, real property for others for compensation? Because that's what I'm teaching you is 93A-2. Provision A. But it sounds so much worse when you read it. Now, when you get into the exemptions, let me explain how this book works, by the way, folks. When you get down to the left column and it ends, you got to go back up to the top of the right column. So here is exemption number 1. Any partnership, corporation, limited liability company, association, or other business entity that as owner or lessor shall perform any of the acts aforesaid with reference to the property owned or leased by them, where the acts are performed in the regular course of or as incident to the management of that property and the investment therein. The exemption from licensure under this subsection shall extend to the following persons when those persons are engaged in acts of or services for which the corporation, partnership, LLC, or other business entity would be exempt hereunder. So this is where it goes on to say officers, W-2 employees, general partners, manager members, natural person owners of the entity. It gives a lot of different pieces. This is all basically part of the same exemption all the way up through here. And so you've got to be very careful with the question. Because if the question is, can Jacob, who owns a property, hire an employee to work for him and manage his property? So think about it. Jacob, the owner, is hiring somebody other than himself to manage his property and paying him money. The answer on your test will always be no. If Awesome Investments LLC owns a property and hires an employee, and they sell it, do they need a license? No. If ABC Builders owns a home and they hire an employee and they sell it, do they need a license? The answer is no. You've got to be very careful. So I'm actually going to circle back around and give you another real world example to connect this to your brains in just a second. But I want to move on to some of the next ones first, okay? So a salaried or hourly W-2 employee or manager or whatever of an entity owner, very specifically entity owner. That word is so important. Don't ever just think owner. It has to be an entity. W-2 salaried employees who are employed by the licensed broker property manager. Now, if I'm not mistaken, these, I believe, are going out of order, but I may be wrong. Let me go back to, and I apologize, my screen is kind of wiggling. I've got like a very, very little table. Yeah, so if you go out of order, I'm going to circle back around to all of these, but we're looking at the most testable ones right now. This is a very specific category. Number 6. Any salaried person employed by a licensed real estate broker for and on behalf of the owner of any real estate or the improvements thereon, which the licensed broker has contracted to manage for the owner, if the salaried employee's employment is limited to. Now, do you see what I'm saying? This is why I don't want you to read this book necessarily verbatim. It's very convoluted. It's very hard to understand. So let me put it in layman's terms for you, folks. As a real estate broker, if Kirsten owned an investment property, and she called me up and she said, Seth, I want you to manage my investment property. Well, as a licensed real estate broker, I can do that. And so I'm getting paid legally because I have a license to get paid to manage her property. So it's okay because I have a license. That's the whole point of getting a license. Everybody okay with that statement? So then what I do is I turn around and I hire Stephanie. She's my employee as a broker managing a property. Stephanie is not a full-fledged license exemption. She can't go out and help people buy and sell houses. But this exemption does allow her to do certain things to assist me. And that exemption includes the ability to show properties for lease that I'm managing. So she could actually show Kirsten's property to potential tenants as an employee of me, a broker, because I have a license. It's this special exemption that is very testable. We're looking at the 3 most testable exemptions right now, okay? So let me just go on to the other things that she can do. She can show the property for lease that I'm managing to potential tenants. Never show a property for sale, though. Never, ever, ever. She could give them a lease and tell them where to sign, a pre-printed lease that I've drafted up. Now, she's very limited. If she hands that lease to a tenant and the tenant says, whoa, $1,700 a month. Stephanie, listen, how about $1,600 a month? Stephanie can't negotiate because she's not a real estate broker, okay? List, lease, auction, negotiate. Remember that N? Negotiation is a brokerage activity. So Stephanie would not be allowed to negotiate. So if somebody was talking to Stephanie, my employee, said, would you do 16? Stephanie's got to say, well, I'll let you talk to Seth, the property manager. She can't negotiate. Okay. She can oversee minor repairs. She can show properties for lease. She can give them lease agreements and instruct them where to sign. She can collect rent monies and tenant security deposits and bring them to me under my supervision, right? This is a very specific exemption. An employee of a broker property manager. Now, let me help you relate these top 2 to the real world. Folks, for some of you, this may have been recently. For some of you, it may have been decades ago. But at some point in our lives, I would wager that most of us have walked into an apartment complex, haven't we? Ooh, and they are pretty nowadays, too. I walked in one the other day for a sales meeting, and I'm like, I'm about to sell my house and live here. They got a coffee bar. They got a pool. They got all these different things. But I digress, okay? If you walk into an apartment complex, one of 2 things is typically happening. The person that you meet at the front, you know the person, right? That says, come on, let's hop on the back of the golf cart and we'll go see unit 203B. That person is one of 2 things. That person is either an employee of a broker property manager that is somewhere in the hierarchy of that management of that building. And so that's why they can show you the properties for lease. That's why they can give you the lease agreement. That's why they can collect your monies from you and then give them to the broker property manager. They're not typically the broker. Especially in big complexes, you're not going to be talking to the broker. It is an employee of the broker. The other option is that apartment complex is owned by Awesome Holdings Incorporated. And they are an employee of Awesome Holdings Incorporated. And so the people that you meet in an apartment complex are one of the top 2 exemptions for not needing a license, because they're either an employee of the entity owner, the person who owns the apartment complex, or they're an employee of a broker property manager that was hired to lawfully and legally manage the complex because they have a license. Does this make sense? Nobody's freaking out yet, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah?
That makes sense, but I think I might have missed
Go ahead.
something.
What you got?
Not heard it. So you're saying that an employee of a broker can is an exemption, correct? But then you also said that they can't negotiate, which is part of LL Beans.
And that's where I said there, so you missed the word limited. It is a very limited exemption. It is not a full-fledged exemption. Yeah, so let me take this a step further, okay? If in that scenario I was the broker property manager and I hired Stephanie as my employee, she can show my personal properties for rent. She can't show any other properties for rent anywhere at any point. It is a very limited exemption.
Only rental properties.
And only the ones I manage. She couldn't even show somebody else's. She is basically acting as an extension of me, and so the only things she can really do, Jacob, she's not a full-fledged exemption. The only things, the most testable thing she can do is show a property for lease that I manage, collect rents and tenant security deposits from the tenants, and give them a pre-printed lease form that I filled out and instruct them where to sign on it. That's really what she's limited to. She can't negotiate terms. She can't show properties for sale. She can't show properties for lease by other brokers. She can only show mine that I'm managing. Very specific exemption. Very limited exemption. And so all these exemptions kind of have some nuance to them if we're being completely honest. And so let me go back to the slides here because this is the other one. Oh, I'm sorry, Josh, what you got?
Can you clarify the structure that you explained to Tim?
Yes, the structure where you would not need a license for an entity?
Where to manage his own property?
To manage your own property?
I think that's what he asked.
Tim builds properties and then sells them. So as a contractor, Tim was talking about having a corporation and would he need a license to sell properties that his corporation owns. So you want to talk about that or do you want to talk about management?
Selling.
Selling. So selling, if you let's say that you're not even a general contractor, if you wanted to go out and build your own house today, and after you finish it, you build it and you own it, yet again, because you own it, you could turn around and sell that to the general public because it's not for others. In Tim's case, he's building them to sale, and so if you create an entity, a corporation, LLC, partnership, and the entity owns the property, so you build it up to completion, and the entity is the deeded owner. That entity could hire an actual salaried or hourly employee who could then turn around and act as like an on-site sales agent and sell those properties for you. And they can negotiate. They can show people the homes for sale. They can do all these things because they are basically an extension of the owner. But that only works for entities. People can't have extensions of themselves, but entities can. Every employee is Microsoft. Every employee is Tim Williams Corporation. Every employee is ABC Builders. Does that make sense?
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
The deed has
It very specifically has to be deeded. Folks, to the extent, I had a student one time in my post-licensing classes. She got her license, she came through, and so here's just a real-world example. She said, well, because we teach this more in depth after this. You know, this is, I got to teach you the testable part of it, but we teach it more in depth after pre-licensing. And so I started teaching this even more in depth in this post-licensing class. And she said, well, Seth, do I even need to be here? I said, I don't know. What do you mean? She said, well, I got my license to help my sister manage some Airbnbs that she has. She has short-term rentals, and I'm managing them for her. And I looked her in the face, and I said, adult diapers. Depends. The brand name of adult diapers is Depends. I didn't use that one yesterday. That's one of my favorite things to say. We didn't get there yet. Folks, if you look, next time you go in the grocery store, you look at the adult diapers. They're called Depends. And that is the best answer to every real estate question. It depends. We don't have a whole lot of absolutes. Very few. If you have a lot of absolute questions, the answer is very seldom an absolute. Okay? So I'll teach you more about that as we go along. So here was my answer. I said it depends. And here's what I asked her. I said, are those properties owned in the name of your sister, or are they owned in the name of an entity that your sister has created? And she said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, that's your answer. If they are owned in the name of the entity that your sister has created, she could hire you as an employee, and you just wasted all this time to be a real estate broker. You didn't need to be. But if they are owned in the name of her, you have to have a license to manage them for her and to get paid for it legally. Does that make sense? You see the difference? An entity owner is an exemption because they are employees acting as an extension. A single person, a person owner, doesn't have that exemption. That will never work. So do not let that trip you up on the test. Now, the other big one that is testable, and they're all potentially testable, but these are hands down the top three, is attorneys, trustees, legally appointed guardians or something like that. So let me give you a real world example of this. Everybody knows who Britney Spears is, okay? And bless her heart, she was just in that awful conservatorship. And, you know, yay for Britney, she's out of it now. Now, folks, in her conservatorship, her dad, I believe his name is Jamie, was considered the guardian of the conservatorship. And so if Jamie so desired, he could have forced Britney to sell her mansion. Britney did not have the legal capacity to do it herself. And so Jamie probably collected some type of compensation for being the guardian of this conservatorship. And so Jamie would potentially help Britney Spears or oversee or sell Britney Spears' property. So we have to tell you this is an exemption because it's not Jamie's property. It was Britney's. And he's getting paid, right? So it's real property for others for compensation. But because it's in a legal appointed relationship, I can't say appointed tonight, a legal appointed relationship, it's an exemption. Because he wasn't put in that position just to act as a real estate broker. It's just something that comes by proxy for the job or the relationship you have. So an attorney, an executor, a trustee, a guardian of any legal relationship would be named as an exemption. Furthermore, an attorney at law would also be named as an exemption. When we get into some of these deeper conversations, attorneys do a lot for us. And in fact, attorneys are what we call these settlement agents in North Carolina. They do title searches, they record new deeds, they pay off some debts, you know, they handle a lot. But attorneys do not need a broker's license because they're doing what they're allowed to do because they have been issued a license under the bar, right, as an attorney. So our real estate attorneys don't need broker's licenses. Now, that they're not allowed to just go out and hold themselves out as brokers legally in North Carolina, right? My attorney that I use could not just go out and put a sign in the yard and start showing people houses and negotiating stuff. That would be the area where they needed a broker's license. But to do the things that they do for a real estate transaction, that's not brokerage. Sam says, what if an LLC doesn't pay you a salary, but they do give you a commission from the sale of the property? Would you need a license? So this is a complicated one. When we're dealing with this conversation, there are other things that come into play, like unlicensed assistants, not of broker property managers, but brokers in general. And so you have to understand that the generalization for people without a license when we get into kind of brokerage is they can't be paid on a per transaction or commission basis. However, if the entity owns the property and it is an employee of the entity handling the sale and they get paid a bonus, that's legal. But they cannot be paid just a commission because, and this is an important factor, we're going to get here later, folks, but real estate brokers are what we call independent contractors. We're self-employed. We are what we call 1099. It's called non-employee compensation. And so if that's how they're paying you, you're not an employee, you don't meet the bill of this exemption. Does that make sense? They have to pay you W-2, but they could give you a bonus for that sale. That would be legal. The real estate commission can't stop that. But if they're only paying you commission, you're not a W-2 employee, now we're in illegal territory. You get paid as commission, 1099? W-2. Oh, sorry, you're muted, Jacob.
I was in the chat and I held down the space bar and it just typed a bunch of spaces. No, I am hourly plus like a bonus, not a commission, per each house sold.
Yeah, and because you are an employee, technically the real estate commission is not really, having any jurisdiction because it is their individual houses that they sell. And so that's where understand that if they're legally paying you bonuses, they could legally just make you an employee and let you pay houses, but they don't want to do that, which is fine. Most builders elect to hire brokers, and that's why they want you to have a broker's license. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the way that it is in my company, at least, I mean, this is, I guess, a sidebar, but they have regular brokers, and those are the people who run all the communities, and then there's people like me who are kind of assistants.
And you cover the communities when they have days off and stuff too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, and I'm not going to pick it because, I don't want anybody to think that Eastwood Homes is doing something right, wrong, or otherwise. It's just a very pertinent and practical example to this, and I'm sure they're doing everything on the up and up. And even if they weren't, not trying to pick on them, I'm sure everything's fine. But that's not the point of this class. Remember, I told you, there are things that happen illegally all the time, and we can't get caught up on that. You have to answer the questions exactly from what's coming from here, not what you've seen in the past, right? It's gotta come from here. That's how you're answering these test questions. I promise. So, the full list of exemptions is listed under 93A-2, and I actually have a more detailed list in a second, and so we'll talk about it. But these are hands down the most testable, okay? Without a doubt. What you got, Jacob? Oh, accident? Yes, no?
No, I'm sorry. I know I'm asking you.
No, always ask questions. Do not ever apologize for questions.
So I understand the lawyers and attorneys and the third exemption, but could you go into just a teeny bit more detail for those of us that don't know what happened with Britney Spears? What the kind of the guardian exception is? Just a little bit more detail on that.
Absolutely. So that's an excellent question. Jacob's question is, why was Britney Spears such a good example in that scenario? Can I give a little more insight? Folks, whether you realize this or not, there are times where you can have your rights stripped away. If you are considered to be a danger to yourself, if you are not of sound mind, your rights can be stripped from you, and that's exactly what happened to Britney Spears. So the courts basically declared her, and this is a very testable topic, and so this is why it's such a good question. The courts basically declared her mentally incompetent. She was not fit to handle her own affairs, and so they assigned what's called a conservatorship, and that basically means that everything had to be approved by the guardian of her conservatorship. In this case was her father. And so the reason why this is so testable, when we get into things like basic contract law, being declared mentally incompetent basically invalidates anything you do of your own volition. So, Jacob, if you walked up to Britney Spears when she was in her conservatorship and you signed a contract to buy her $6.8 million mansion, toss it out. Has no legal standing. Britney Spears does not have the capacity to contract because she has been declared mentally incompetent. Now, during her guardianship, her dad would have had to make all those decisions for her. And so there are some times where people have rights over other people. And sometimes it's not even due to mental incompetence. Sometimes it's what we call a universal power of attorney or an unlimited power of attorney, which is very common with military spouses. If your spouse is in Iraq for 10 years straight, you need to be able to sign on behalf of them to make financial decisions, to sell real estate, to do all these different things. And so sometimes you have this authority granted to you by the courts to bind people or make decisions for other people. And so that's why she was significant there. Because Jamie her dad, would have made the decisions. He would have been paid. It would have been real property. So under normal circumstances, it's like, oh my God, wait, that's real property for others for compensation. But it's a specially named exemption because he was a guardian of a court-appointed relationship. That make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Thank you for the clarification.
Absolutely. Now, furthermore, understand that Britney Spears has, Britney Spears has been given her rights back. And I don't know if y'all been watching Homegirl on Instagram over the past couple years, but I don't know that that was necessarily the right choice to make. Listen, I'm all for a hashtag free Britney, folks, but Homegirl really is a little out there, okay? Like, Hollywood did her dirty. They did. She's, bless her heart, all right? She just needs somebody needs to give her a big old hug tonight, all right? That's what she needs. So, this is just clarification on what I've already been telling you, okay? The salaried employee of the entity owner, very specifically entities, okay? There is no such thing as an employee of a person. They can act as an extension of that person. Do not let that trip you up on the test questions, right? To say that Misty hires, I always pick the easier names. Is it Eliza? Is that right? Is that how you say it? Eliza. Yep. Thank you. Misty hires Eliza to manage her property and pays Eliza, yada, yada, yada. Folks, that's a problem if Eliza doesn't have a license because Eliza cannot be an extension of Misty. It's very specific. Entities who own the property can hire employees, right? Not people. People would be real property for others for compensation. Now, this is where I told you, too, that they can do whatever. They can negotiate. They can show the property. They can, anything. There's no limitations because they're just doing it for themselves. Think about it. If you wanted to sell your property today, okay, Sam goes to sell her property. She owns a house. She goes to sell it. What's she going to do? She's going to put a sign in the yard. She's going to come up with a price. She's going to post it on Zillow. She's going to put her phone number out there. And so if I'm an unrepresented buyer, okay, I'm just some schmuck out in the world who finds her home on Zillow, I'm going to call her up and say, Sam, I saw you're selling 123 Main Street as a for sale by owner. And Sam says, yes, I sure am. Well, folks, when I ask to see it, who do you think is going to show it to me? Sam. You think she's going to give keys to a stranger to just wander through her house? No. So I'm going to go knock on the door and Sam's going to say, I'm so glad you're interested in my house. Come see it. And then after I see it, I'm going to say, Sam, I'd like to buy it for $300. What's Sam going to say? There you go.
Not in this economy.
Go higher. How about $345? So understand what's happening. Sam is showing me the property. Sam is negotiating with me. Sam is doing all the LL Beans activities, but it doesn't matter because it's her freaking house. So don't let that confuse you on the test, folks. An employee of an entity owner can negotiate, can show properties for sale. That simplified exemption, that employee of a broker property manager, they can't show properties for sale. Don't get those confused. They can only show those properties managed by their boss, the broker. These three specific are the most testable, and it's very easy to get them confused. Now, I'm going to make you feel, oops, I almost knocked over all my stuff. I'm going to make you feel a little more warm and fuzzy inside. This is not the only time we're going to have this discussion. I just find that because this is so testable on the North Carolina portion of the exam, I like to just throw it at you right off the bat. And it has time to meld in your brains. And then when we get closer to the end and we start diving into some of the other license law and commission rule aspects, we talk about this again. So it kind of circles back around because it's a lot to take in. I know. Here's just the clarification on the salaried employees of a broker property manager. And remember, I did promise I will give you a copy of all of these slides by next week. Stephanie made me promise that. I just said I got a lot going on. It's going to take me a while to convert them into PDF. It's okay, Stephanie. It's a good question. You need them. I want them to help you. So you will get these. So very specific exemption here. They cannot do all the LL Beans activities. They are limited to, as I said, showing the properties for lease that their broker boss is managing, collecting rents and security deposits. They can hand out the lease forms to sign. They can set appointments. They can answer basic tenant questions, but they should never be negotiating. Okay, negotiating is not something that they can do. And they also have to be W-2. They cannot be paid on a per transaction basis. Okay, I told you we can't stop the employee of an entity owner from being paid that way. But very specifically, an employee of a broker cannot be paid on a per transaction basis.
Wait, you said that an employee of a entity can't be paid on a transaction basis either.
I'm sorry, let me clarify. They can have those bonuses. They can make a bonus based on it. They just can't be solely paid that way. What I mean is because those are two different tax statuses, you would have to be on the books is what you have to understand. So you'd have to be W-2, but that's where you can pay a bonus based on a transaction closing if you're an entity owner, as long as it's a bonus to a W-2 person.
Yeah, and a employee of as an extension of a broker is also W-2 and can still receive
They can't receive bonuses, no.
Okay, so that's the difference.
That's the difference. So I can't give you any kind of additional income based on lease volume because that's paying you on a per transaction basis. Okay, it's not allowed in North Carolina. So it's solely W-2 hourly or salary for an employee of a broker property manager. Yep.
So if apartment communities are giving you a bonus, that's not legal in the state of North Carolina?
Well,
Giving you a to lease that you close?
It depends. Remember, Josh, I told you there's two different setups for the apartment complex. If it is an entity-owned complex and you're an employee, then you can get that bonus as a W-2. But if it is being managed by a broker property manager, somebody with a license like me, and you work for that property manager, then legally, no, they should not be giving you bonuses based on lease volume. But does it probably happen, Josh? Absolutely. But,
Say that one more time. You said the broker property manager.
Yeah.
And that was the broker property manager.
Yeah, because remember, that's the whole point of this class, folks. What we're talking about is when a license is required or not. Well, if I have a license and you have a 700-unit apartment complex, Josh, you can call me up and say, I got this 700-unit apartment complex. Will you manage it for me? And you're going to pay me good money to do it. But that's okay. You know why? Because I'm licensed. So I can legally be paid for real property for others for compensation because I have a license. And so 700 units is more than I can handle. So what am I going to do? I'm going to hire 10 employees to help me manage it as an extension of myself who can do very limited things to assist me. Yeah.
So we keep using apartments as the example for that situation, like an apartment complex, but that would also transfer over if somebody were to do that with selling homes potentially as well, right? I mean, I know that it's, well, I guess no, because you said that they can't show.
You talking about an employee of a broker?
Only rent.
Yeah.
Never mind. I answered my own question.
Yeah, you did, which is fantastic. That's kind of the point, because then you start to really understand these things. Now, do understand, folks, that there are going to be times that we're talking about a W-2 assistant of a broker. There are some times where we as real estate brokers will hire assistants that have nothing to do with property management. And so those people can't even show properties for lease. The only reason that the employees of a broker property manager can is because their boss is managing that property. If I had an assistant, you're going to see a slide that'll help you with this in just a second. If I hired an unlicensed person to be my assistant, they can do administrative, clerical duties, laborious tasks. Okay? They can't show anything for sale. They can't show anything for lease. And they can't do anything like that. And that's where this is confusing, right? You got to be able to differentiate between all these different pockets of categories.
Could said assistant, right? Say you're a real estate agent selling homes. Could said assistant in terms of doing busy work. I know that they can't do. I'm assuming that they would be a limited exemption as well because they're an extension of a broker. But they can't show anything correct because it's not a lease. But could they still do things such as say, put for sold signs out.
Yeah, that's labor. That's just like, move this from here to here. That's labor. Go put a lockbox on the door. That's labor. Go pick up a sign. That's labor. Drop these keys off to somebody. That's labor. Administrative and labor, they can always do. But they can't do anything that would constitute brokerage. No showing properties for sale, no showing. And I do have a slide that'll help you in just a second on this. Now, let me look at these other two questions in the chat.
Still just nothing LL Beans.
Correct. Nothing LL Beans in any way, shape, and form. Now, sometimes that line is a little more blurred, and I'll show you. Josh says they can't auction either. Auctions are kind of a special category. In order to auction something like real estate, in North Carolina, you would need to have an auctioneer's license and a broker's license. But there is a specific exemption that you would potentially need to know about because it named it briefly. A mere crier is exempt. A mere crier is just the fancy word for the person who talks really fast, right? Oh, I got 300, 300, going to 30, 30, 30. That's a mere crier. And they're an employee of an auctioneer firm. So they don't need a license. But the auctioneer firm themselves, auctioning off real property, would need an auctioneer's license and a broker's license in order to do auction sales. Now, the other thing in the chat, Monica said closing coordinators. That's exactly right. Some people utilize assistants, some people utilize closing coordinators, and some people treat them as the same thing, but call them different names. And it really just depends. So closing coordinators are typically hired to do the paperwork piece, right? When all of it comes through, they're emailing stuff to the attorneys. They're checking on dates. They're setting appointments, but not going to the appointments. All of that is okay. But let me give you an example here of when it would not. Folks, there is something that we sometimes negotiate in North Carolina in the middle of a transaction called a due diligence request agreement. And if a transaction coordinator was the one negotiating that, that would be a legal brokerage activity because that's negotiations. So they are always limited to administrative, clerical, and things of that nature. What you got, Adriana?
So the closer coordinator is a broker?
No. Typically not. They're an unlicensed assistant. Is basically, yep.
They're just finishing paperwork, but they are not negotiating anything.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I showed you where these are located in the license law and commission rule book. And so we're going to talk about these, more, as I said, down the road. But here's just the visual, again, kind of transposed onto these slides for the unlicensed salaried employee. Receive and forward phone calls, submit listings and changes to a multiple listing service, secure copies of public records. Now, this is not specifically talking about the employee of a broker property manager. And so unlicensed assistants come into the equation as well. I'm going to show you a slide that will kind of help you with this in just a second, but I'm going to give you a break first. How about them apples? Let it just meld in your brain. So we are talking about some very specific conversations that we need to have. Got to tickle my throat. In regard to when a license is required, what are the exemptions, how you're going to be tested on it. And so there are even more categories than what we've touched on. When you look at the actual list, and let me just go back to it really quick. It drops down here. And so here's where the list continues on. So number one was the entity owner and said employees, owners, managers of an entity owner. Another exemption, anybody acting as an attorney in fact, meaning under an executed power of attorney. I like to just group a lot of the attorney ones together because then it goes on to say any person while acting as a trustee under a written trust agreement, guardianship under conservatorship, all of these basically get grouped together so then you don't have to keep too many separate things in your mind, right? Any legal appointed position and the regular actions of whatever your legal appointment is. An attorney, in fact, is somebody who's authorized to act on behalf of you by a power of attorney, a guardian of a conservatorship, a trustee who manages the trust document, which we'll talk more about trust later, on behalf of a beneficiary. So Acts or services performed by an attorney who is an active member. That's where I said a real estate attorney can do real estate stuff that pertains to being an attorney, but they couldn't hold themselves out as a broker. That's where you see the trust one. The trustee, guardian, administrator. Here's the salaried person employed by a licensed real estate broker. Now, it does, as I said, kind of differentiate between what an employee of a broker property manager can do versus an employee of just a general broker. And so that's where I said, you know, if you're just hiring an assistant as a broker, then they can do administrative, clerical, right, data entry, laborious tasks, and those things. So that's what we're looking at on the slides when I switch back. The other thing, of course, is the individual property owner is named as number 7. And then number 8 is anybody within a housing authority. So a member of an HOA. Folks, your HOA, your homeowners association, deals with real estate. They can put liens on your property. They can foreclose on property, and they maintain trust accounts. But you do not need a broker's license to be a president, a vice president, a member at large, a secretary, or any position on your homeowners association. So these are the named exemptions, and they all could absolutely be on the test. The main 3 that we mentioned earlier was the employee of a broker property manager, an entity owner, right? An employee of an entity owner, and then any of these court-appointed authorities are going to be hands down the most testable, but you could see any of these. So when you go back to the slides, this list right here is specifically naming what an unlicensed employee of a broker can do. And it's all administrative stuff. Receive and forward phone calls, submit listings, meaning data input, search public records, place the for sale and for rent signs in the yard, schedule appointments, not take people to go see them, act as a courier, type up offers. Let me clarify this. Type up offers, contracts, and leases from drafts of pre-printed forms completed by a licensee. So what I mean is if I go to a listing appointment with Dora and I talk about everything that we're going to do to sell her house and I just kind of scribble it on a listing agreement and I go around and then to my assistant and I say, here, type this up, make it look pretty and send it over to Dora. They can do that because yet again, that's data entry. Okay. So I'll give you kind of an easier visual here. They can fill in the blanks from those broker prepared drafts, as I just said. If they were working on behalf of a property manager, this employee could show properties for rent and give them these pre-printed lease forms. And they can place advertisements on different sources as long as we give them the information to go in that advertisement. So these next 2 slides are actually pulled from one of the most recent update courses with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. It's just a slightly more fun and entertaining way to see everything that I just told you. Because you got this nice little fella that gives you a thumbs up of they can do this without a license, or a thumbs down they can't do this without a license. So here you go. These are all okay for an unlicensed assistant to do. Everything that we've been saying. Remember, I'm going to give you a copy of these slides. Don't panic. And then here's the list of things that are no bueno. Cannot host open houses, cannot negotiate anything, cannot explain documents, cannot give counsel, no opinions, cannot supervise major repairs, anything like that. So, let's get into some more examples. What you got?
So I was gonna say, so these are, so like, for example, one of the things it says, offer opinions or counsel clients or answer consumer questions about properties. So these are all unlicensed. Is this including or excluding the exceptions that we were just talking about?
We are talking about a specific exception at the moment, an employee of a broker. What they can do and what they can't do.
Still talking about.
Yeah, we are talking about a very specific exception. The employee of a broker cannot do these things. So we're not talking about any other exception right now, just an unlicensed employee of a broker. Somebody with a real estate license can't do these things.
Why can they not prepare advertising or promotional material? That one actually kind of surprises me.
You and the rest of the real estate brokers over 20. Okay? Here's the thing. For whatever reason, and so I tell my experienced brokers this all the time, because especially my older demographic of real estate agents, they're like, well, why can't I just hire some college kid to go out and do my advertisements? The thing is, when you're advertising things to the public, we consider that a brokerage activity because you're going to be talking about the features of homes and you're advertising it for sale, for lease, for whatever. And there's also really big important laws that we have to be aware of, like fair housing laws. And we don't expect a non-real estate professional to necessarily know how to not violate fair housing. Furthermore, there are advertising rules, specifically Rule 58A.0105, which deals with everything an advertisement has to have. So the presumption is if you give them free rein to advertise, they're probably going to violate our laws, rules, and other bigger legislation like the Fair Housing Act. So the way that we look at it is you can give them information and say, go put this on Facebook. But you cannot give them free rein to say, advertise every unit as it becomes available. Advertise every listing as I have it. That's not allowed. They're not allowed to just take free rein on the advertising. Now, yet again, Kirsten, does it happen a lot? Yes. But the commission, for whatever reason, has stated, no, they can't just take over our advertisements for us because advertising real estate property for sale, for lease, for whatever, those are brokerage activities.
So if I wanted to hire somebody, let's say, to do drone footage for me, I could not do that.
No, you absolutely can. Please don't misconstrue. What we mean is the full-fledged advertising. We can hire photographers, we can hire videographers, we can hire drone footage. But what we're saying is, Kirsten, you couldn't hire somebody and say, go hire a photographer, have all the pictures taken, and then draft up some really cool advertisements for Facebook and TikTok and all these different things. You can't give them somebody free rein to just handle all the advertising. You can absolutely have somebody do assets, if you will. That's okay. But then you should be trying to figure out what's going to actually be disseminated, and then you tell them what you want on there. Take this video footage, this picture, this verbiage, put it on Facebook. That's what we're expected to do. Because yeah, there you go. Yeah, the actual recording, the actual all that stuff, that's fine. Because that's just them doing their profession. Taking videos, taking pictures, taking whatever. It's just formulating it all for sale on social media, newspaper, print, or whatever would be a brokerage thing. So here's where it just reiterates some of these exemptions. I showed you where to actually find it. So we've already talked about this. The business entity exemption, it makes sense, folks, because it's not for others. Microsoft is selling Microsoft's properties, and everybody who works for Microsoft is Microsoft. No license required. We already said attorney practicing law, anybody else doing their real estate related job, as long as it pertains to them only. We've touched on all these now, and I promise we will look at them some more. So I'm not going to beat this into the ground, as long as, everybody's cool. But I'll give you a couple more examples to make sure you're comfortable. Or let me not give you a couple examples yet, but let me explain one more thing first. It is very important, because we're talking about exemptions. It is very important to understand that there is no other exemptions other than the exemptions we're talking about. There is no such thing, and they're going to try to trip you up on the test, I promise. Listen to me. There is no such thing as, oh, what if it's for a family member? Oh, what if it's only for, a couple $100? Oh, what if it's for a gift card? Oh, what if it, there is no like, oh, but it was only this. Oh, but it was only this. So understand that if it is a scenario where they say you got $1, it's still a violation of license on commission rule of your own license. If it's real property for others for compensation, even $1, it's a problem. If it's a gift card, it's a problem. If it's a stay in a rental property, it's a problem. If it's a use of a car, it's a problem. If it is anything of value for anybody other than yourself dealing with real estate and does not fall into some of those other exemptions in some way, shape, or form, you need to answer it on the test as it's a problem. And this is where I kind of told you yesterday. Do you think this kind of crap is happening in the real world? Of course it is. but it is very illegal to pay somebody, even a gift card or a bottle of wine, for sending you a referral fee. So here's where I'll give you a scenario now. True or false, an unlicensed owner may compensate an unlicensed person to show rental property and collect rent on their behalf if the unlicensed person does not negotiate on behalf of the owner. Read it carefully.
False.
False. False. A property owner, not an entity owner, wants to compensate somebody who is unlicensed to show a property for lease. That is dealing with leases. That's an LO Beans activity. Even though they may not be negotiating, they are leasing. They are doing something in the act of leasing, showing a property for lease. Real property for others for compensation, you would need a license. You've got to read these questions carefully. Now, I mentioned this earlier, and so let me reiterate it because this is going to be a very testable concept in several different facets, okay? We started having conversations about, well, being paid hourly versus, commission or whatever. There is a big differentiation that kind of goes hand in hand with this. When you get your broker's license, folks, the vast majority of you will work as what is called an independent contractor. And you will form a relationship with a brokerage firm by way of what's called an independent contractor's agreement. Now, independent contractors are self-employed. They're not an employee. They cannot be treated like an employee, and they're not compensated like an employee. So there's a big difference, and that's why I told you, you cannot pay somebody $10.99 and try to call them an employee. They're either an employee or an independent contractor. They can't be both. An employee can get bonuses, but you can't be both. At least not for the sake of a test question, for all intents and purposes. If you want to get technical, I actually am both for my school, but I digress. For the sake of the test, you can't be both. So that means that if you were set to make a $10,000 commission, you're going to make $10,000. Nobody's taking anything out of it. So that means you have to turn around and pay self-employment taxes to the IRS. If we're W-2, that means it's your employer's responsibility. They have to withhold taxes to pay the government. They would pay your employment taxes to the government. There is a whole big differentiation there. So W-2 or salaried versus independent contractor. Now, I've kind of given you some insight. Stephanie, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
No, I just hit the button.
No worries.
But I'm currently a 1099 contractor. So I went from being a W-2 employee with the state to being an independent contractor. And the tax thing is, I've always done my own taxes, and I was like, oh my God, this is a whole big difference.
It's very different.
Very, very different.
But the good news is you get a lot more deductions being self-employed because every expense is a deduction for your business, right? Your travel is deductible. Your photography is deductible. Your signs, as a real estate agent, right? Your signs are deductible. There's your training. Now, technically, folks, I hate to break it to you, this class, from what I've heard from CPAs, is not deductible because you are not a real estate broker yet. So once you get your license, any future classes would be deductible for your business. But since you're aspiring to get into the business, this isn't technically deductible as a self-employed real estate broker. But future classes are. So let me allow you to piece this together. And we actually literally looked at or talked about this similar example. So Ashley is an on-site employee of ABC Builders Incorporated. She is paid an annual salary of $90,000. She meets with potential buyers to show them homes, help them select floor plans, choose options, and prepare purchase agreements. Would Ashley need a real estate license?
No.
I like how if I just sit really still, some of you will start to change your answers. Like he didn't nod at us. Change it. See if he nods after you say the opposite one. Folks, no, you don't need a license here because she is paid on a hourly or salary basis. ABC Builders Incorporated owns the home. And so they are selling as an extension of themselves. Ashley, for all intents and purposes, is also ABC Builders because she's an employee of ABC Builders. ABC Builders owns the home. Ashley works for them. Ergo, it falls under that exemption of an employee of an entity owner. No license needed. Now, if you get this same question that says Ashley's paid $10.99, she'd need a license. You see how they'll try to trick you on the test. They will give you very similar scenarios. One will say she's a salaried employee making whatever. And then in another one, they'll say, oh, they're $10.99 making $90,000. Oh, well, that changes things. How about this one? Tom lives in one of his grandparents' triplex units for free. In exchange, he manages the other 2 units. He deals with the tenants, orders repairs, collects the rents, etc. Would this be an acceptable setup, or would Tom need a license?
He needs a license.
Needs a license.
He needs a license. Folks, I told you, there ain't no exception for your grandparents, okay? Last time I checked, Mima was not you. All right? So it is real property. It is for others. And we can all agree that free rent is definitely something of value. And if they look like this, I want them to adopt me. I will manage that day in and day out. I'm going to live there and I'm going to take care of all the business, okay? Legally, I don't even care. Just don't tell nobody, all right? I'm going to do it. But folks, Tom would need a license. Otherwise, he's doing illegal brokerage activity. So let me kind of show you what an example test question. We're giving you scenarios, but of course, everything is multiple choice. So Betty is a licensed real estate broker in North Carolina who is managing an apartment complex. She is brainstorming ways to attract new tenants. Which of the following would not be allowable as a promotion? Take a minute, read through it, tell me what you come up with.
D?
I would say B.
Yeah, it's B.
Let's talk about them, folks. Okay? You've got to be able to kind of break apart what's happening here. The first one says 2 free months rent for any new tenants who signs a 1-year lease. Well, folks, it's not for others. You're renting real property. You're making something of value, but it's your lease. That's okay. It happens all the time, and it is completely okay to offer somebody a month or 2 months of free rent because it's not for others. It's their specific leasing of real estate. Does that statement make sense for everybody? They are they're what we call a party to the transaction. I'm going to use that more in a moment when we get into some of the other exemptions down the road or the other special conditions down the road. B, which is where most of you are leaning towards, says a free month's rent given to any current tenants who recommend a friend that signs a 1-year lease. And so picture it. You're living in an apartment. There's units available, and your apartment complex says, send me your buddies to lease. So somebody leasing real property other than you, and if you send me somebody, I'll pay you. That's the problem. You got to have a license, right? Because it is real property for others for compensation. These people getting this benefit, this financial benefit, they're not a party to this new lease. They're sending a referral as an unlicensed broker. It would be illegal for this apartment complex to pay them, and it would be illegal for them to receive it. B is not the one that's not appropriate. Now, if you go on to the next ones, let me just make sure you understand. Reducing the price of the 3-bedroom apartments, that's completely allowable. Reduce the price, make it more affordable, entice more buyers. And then the last one, this is where you've got to understand. Offering a $250 referral fee to any licensed real estate agent who brings a tenant that signs the lease. Folks, that's the whole point of you getting your license. If somebody looked me in the face and said, Seth, if you bring me a tenant, you can have $250. I say, bet. I go find them a tenant, they pay me $250, and it is extremely legal. Why? Because I went through this course already. I have an active broker's license. I'm allowed to be paid. That is the whole point of this class. Do not let that trip you up because you don't have a license yet. If this person has a license, they absolutely can do LL Bean's activities, real property for others for compensation. That is the whole point of having a license. To get paid for doing these brokerage activities.
That's the whole thing, is everybody has to be careful for the wording, because if it was worded different, saying offering a $250 referral for anyone who brings a tenant that signs a lease, then that would not be.
That's exactly right. That'd be a problem because anyone's too vague, and so that does not make it a true statement. But any licensed real estate agent, that was very specific, wasn't it? There you go. As I mentioned, we're going to talk about this some more as we, get later into the section. But this is really where I wanted to start you on, some of these LO Beans activities, this when a license is required, because it's going to be very testable from a North Carolina point of view. So we started off right off the bat, rip the Band-Aid, let it sink in, and then we'll talk more about it later. Now, I want to dig a little bit deeper now into some of the things that I also touched on yesterday. Okay, so we're going to kind of switch gears here. And we're going to go into our licensing categories, some of the rules within North Carolina in regards to having a license, and then some of the verbiage differentiations you need to be aware of for the state licensing exam. So buckle up, buttercups, because this is going to hurt your brain a little bit, okay? And I'm sorry. So, yesterday I started to kind of make this clarification, but I've done one better, and I've actually put it on your slide. I have broken this into two sides. What you're going to see on the North Carolina test for verbiage, and what you're more than likely going to see on the national test for verbiage. So, as I told you yesterday, everybody in North Carolina is a broker. We are what's called a broker-only state, but every broker is potentially on a different status, okay? And so I told you, when you all get through this course and you pass the test, and then you pass your state licensing test, and you get your license issued, who remembers what status your license is issued on? Provisional. And so every single license, more or less, is issued on provisional status in North Carolina. Now, what did I tell you was unique about being a provisional broker?
You are supervised?
You are supervised, folks. You cannot use, if you go through all the hoops and you get your license and it comes in the mail and it's bright and shiny and pretty, guess what? You can't use it yet. You cannot use your license until you affiliate with a broker in charge. You have to have supervision. A provisional broker is basically training wheels. But we don't let you go out and ride without yourself. Imagine having a kid who doesn't know how to ride a bike and you get them a bike with training wheels. Are you just going to tell them to go outside by themselves and drive in the streets? No. You may have given them training wheels, but you still got to watch them. So provisional broker is always the starting point, and there's going to be a lot of different testable concepts, so I'm going to circle back around to that. But on the national side, that is the equivalent of a salesperson. If we're looking from a national test point of view, a salesperson is somebody who can do real estate transactions, albeit supervised. They have to have somebody. Now, in those states that have salespersons, I said you could be a salesperson until the day you die. There is never any obligation to move on to what they call a broker. In North Carolina, we have to move on to broker. We do not have an option. Who remembers how long you have to become a broker in North Carolina?
90 days, right?
Year and a half.
It's 18 months.
18 months. There you go.
10 months, yeah. 18
That would be cruel and unusual if we made it 90 days, wouldn't it? Because listen, you have to go through a lot of education here, so we're not going to be that mean. Because remember, it is 90 hours of additional education. It is comprised of 3 30-hour post-licensing classes. That's what we call them. Now, I told you, you can move to broker as fast or as slow as you want. Because you can take those classes as fast or as slow as you want, as long as you don't go past 18 months. So if you want to get them knocked out in 3 weeks, you can be a full broker in 3 weeks after you get your license. If you want to wait until month 17, day 29, as long as they're all completed before that 18th month hits, you live to fight another day. So one of the most complex things on the North Carolina test, because, I just like to warn you, they use a lot of AKAs for that term broker. And I told you this yesterday. When you see broker on the North Carolina test, it may also be referred to as a non-provisional broker. Remember, read that word as not. You are not provisional. So you're either provisional or you're not provisional. And then we also call it a full broker. Now, when we say broker, broker is a strong enough word that basically says you can operate independently. You don't need supervision. Now, here's the caveat. It is very testable what you can and can't do without supervision in North Carolina. And I'm going to say, hold on to that. But in theory, you can operate without supervision as a broker in North Carolina. In other states, a broker is basically the equivalent of employing broker, managing broker. It is somebody who can operate independently. The verbiage on the national test, hopefully I'll be able to provide some more insight as we get a little more info from the Pearson VUE Testing Center. But typically, they don't use the term broker in charge. They say managing broker, employing broker, or just broker. And it's somebody who can operate independently, somebody who is at the top level in those states, because they don't necessarily have 3 tiers. In North Carolina, we have a step further. We have what we call BIC eligible and BIC. Remember, BIC stands for broker in charge. I told you the criteria are the same. It's just that a BIC is actively overseeing somebody or an entity, and a BIC eligible broker is sitting at the ready to oversee somebody or an entity. Now, don't worry, there are slides for these different things as well. This is just me kind of talking you through it. What you got, Kirsten? I'm really perceptive, by the way.
If you're going to get to this, just tell me to pause. But when you're being supervised, are you being supervised by a BIC or by a broker or either or?
In North Carolina, it has to be a BIC.
It's a BIC. Okay.
Yeah. As a broker, you can potentially operate on your own to some limited capacity without a BIC. But when I say you need supervision or you have supervision, that is always a broker in charge. Only a broker in charge can supervise other people. Yeah. Good question. The one after that was one that was very briefly mentioned in the Relink book, the LNCL, the Limited Non-Resident Commercial License, and then the firm license. What you got, Jacob?
So to be a BIC, you have to go through a little bit of extra education, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so somebody who's BIC eligible, does that mean that's somebody who has already completed said education, or somebody who has the qualifications but not yet?
Yes. Technically, it could be either. Timing comes into play. Hang tight. Yeah, it could be either. There are timing constraints because there's qualifications that you have to meet before you can be BIC or BIC eligible. But then we go on to say, well, there's also education, but you have 2 different options. And so just to give you some insight, you can either take that education up to a year in advance of becoming BIC or BIC eligible, or you can take it up to 120 days after you designate it as BIC or BIC eligible. So in theory, from a testable point of view, you could be BIC or BIC eligible without taking that education yet, but you would be required to get it done before a certain deadline in order to keep that status. Yeah, good question. All good questions. So the last one on the North Carolina side is the word firm license. And so remember I told you that is a license that an entity gets. We're sitting here and we're having these conversations about this term entity. And so a Coldwell Banker needs a firm license. A Keller Williams needs a firm license. A Century 21 needs a firm license in order to operate. Because remember when we looked at 93A-2, the definition of a broker was any person, entity, right, including LLC, partnership, or otherwise, doing these LO means activities. Well, we can all agree that a real estate brokerage firm is doing those activities and getting paid for it. You cannot be legally compensated, person, entity, doesn't matter, for brokerage activities unless you have a license in North Carolina. For a people, it's called a broker's license. For a thing, it's called a firm license. Go ahead.
Repeat that one again. Sorry.
I said that you cannot be legally compensated for any brokerage activity unless you have a license. And so for a people, it's called a broker's license. For an entity, it's called a firm license. Let me help you out. Keller Williams, ABC Partners, is an entity. And Keller Williams ABC Partners wants to help people buy and sell houses and get paid for it. And Keller Williams ABC Realty has a bank account. If Keller Williams ABC Realty helped somebody and collected a commission check, and they did not have a firm license registered with the Real Estate Commission, they just got paid for a legal brokerage activity because the money went to Keller Williams ABC Realty. So it doesn't matter that it's not a real thing. If the money's going to it, it needs a license in order to be legally compensated for brokerage. If I was to pay you for helping me sell my house, Dora, as a real estate agent, you need a broker's license to legally accept that. If you create an entity called Dora is Awesome LLC Real Estate Team, your entity would need a firm license if I was going to cut the check to them instead of you directly. It'll make more sense as time goes on, I promise. It's an abstract thought process for a lot of people.
The LNCL, could you talk about that just a little bit more?
I am going to talk about it, folks. Remember, I know y'all have got lots of questions and y'all very excited about all this information, but do understand that I'm on slide 43 out of 69. Every single thing is going to pop up, right? It is. So sometimes I just got to say, hang tight, because especially as we get into the agency concepts, you're going to have oodles and oodles of questions. But the thing is, sometimes you don't have all the information, right? And so you've got to wait for some of it to kind of fall into your lap. Be like, let me give you an analogy here. It'd be like me telling you that like 3 of a kind in poker is good, and then you're just like, okay, great, let's play. And I'm like, no. There's more you need to know before we can play the game. You're going to lose if all you know is that 3 of a kind is good. So I am going to talk about the LNCL. I'll give you the brief version, though, Jacob. It is for people who are licensed in another state who want to come play commercial real estate in North Carolina without going through this class. They can go through a certain process and apply for a limited non-resident commercial license. It's temporary, it is limited, it is for non-residents only, and it is only to transact commercial. It's one of these very rare times in real estate where when you read the words, it is exactly what it sounds like. And I'm going to talk about all of them in great detail, I promise. So let me remind you of another thing, and that's where we talked about this yesterday. One of the most dangerous things about this class is what I call the misnomers. The things that you thought you knew that you don't actually know. Here's the example. Everybody calls us agents, brokers, and realtors. Those are not the same. You are an agent, as you will find out shortly. Not tonight, but shortly. You are an agent because you represent other people in a fiduciary relationship. I'll explain that word more later. You are a broker because you get a North Carolina real estate broker's license issued to you by the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. And you are a realtor if and only if you join a trade organization called the National Association of Realtors. Remember, too, that I told you a broker is not automatically a real estate agent. There are real estate brokers, which is what you are all endeavoring to be in North Carolina. And a broker is just somebody who brings together the two parties. Bring somebody who wants to sell real estate and buy real estate. That's a brokerage activity. Bring together people who want to lease out real estate and people who want to lease it. Lessor, lessee, landlord, tenant, whatever you want to call that relationship. We bring together the two parties. That's what makes us a real estate broker. And that license that you're all working towards gives us the legal right to do that and to be paid for that. But there are stockbrokers, there are mortgage brokers, there are insurance brokers, there are a lot of other brokers that exist. So when I was talking about the firm earlier, it is such an abstract concept for a lot of people, because if you've never created a business, or if you've never really delved into how entities and companies work, it can get rather challenging. And so an entity, by definition, is a business that has been created with the Secretary of State. The most common examples of entities that we will refer to in this class are partnerships, corporations, and limited liability companies. If you wanted to right now, every single one of you in this room could go to the North Carolina Secretary of State's website, and you can file some paperwork and you can create a business. Every single one of you. Corporation, LLC, general partnership, doesn't matter. Now, there are tax ramifications and pros and cons to each of these, but every single one of you could do it today. And then what you could then turn around and do is file with the IRS for an EIN number, which is an employee identification number. And then you could use that EIN number to turn around and open a business account with a bank. And then you can get insurance, and then you can go out and you're going to start your pressure washing company, your dog walking business, your this, your that, your the other. Folks, that's a business. The reason why people create businesses, let me just make it so simple for you. If I went out today and I offered to walk your dog, if you paid me $100, and I walk your dog, and in the midst of walking your dog, a semi-truck comes down and it hits your dog and your dog died, you are going to sue me for negligence and letting your dog get murdered. And when you take me to court, you will be going after everything I own. The reason people create entities is it acts as a shield in a lot of cases. I don't want you to hire me anymore. I want you to hire my company, Awesome Dog Walkers LLC. And so now when I walk your dog and I screw up and you sue me, you're suing Awesome Dog Walkers LLC. Joke's on you. There's $6 to their name. Now, is it a perfect science? No. Is there some ways that people can still go after you? Yes. But you have to understand that that's really the reason. The reason people create entities is to have protection. As the name implies, limited liability. We are trying to limit our liability. Corporations are treated like, all these things are treated like people. So the reason the entities are created is to limit our liability and for tax benefits. Businesses get more tax benefits than individuals do. Does this make sense? What you got, Stephanie? You said you look like you're about to add something there.
No, that's just part of what I was talking about. We're going from a W-2 to 1099.
There you go.
We had to decide if we were doing a partnership, a limited liability. You just have to do your research and figure out what works best for you as an individual, because it doesn't work the same for everybody.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. So, and I'll be honest with you, that's way outside of the scope of this class, right? We're talking about these, but the conversations will never come into really in depth on, which one's the best one for you. That's too complex for this class. Even if you see a couple slides on it, it's really not that testable in any way, shape, or form. Corporations have the greatest form of protection, but they're double taxed, but they're also great for companies that want stock options. Now, let me take this a step further. I told you any single one of you could do this right now. But that's because you're trying to start some other type of business. Well, folks, you can't create an entity and call it Awesome Attempt at Being a Real Estate Broker Without a License, LLC, and then go out and say, I can help you buy a house through Awesome Attempt at Being a Broker Without a License, LLC, and then get paid a commission and now you're magically, it's legal? No. If your entity that you created got paid for doing brokerage activity, it's just as illegal as if any of you folks got paid for brokerage activity at this very moment in time. Does that make sense? The reason why Coldwell Banker, HPW, Keller Williams, Platinum, Century 21, Legacy Partner, whatever they are, the reason why they can get paid for brokerage activity is because they have acquired something called a firm license. You have to go to the commission and say, I've created this business with the Secretary of State, and I want you to give it a license so it can be what collects my commissions instead of you sending it to me directly. Now, folks, I alluded to this yesterday, but an entity cannot sit through my class like you folks are. And so the way that a firm gets a license is by way of what's called a qualifying broker. An owner of an entity having a broker's license will qualify that entity to get a firm license. So
So it has to be the owner who has...
in North Carolina, you have to have an ownership interest in order. Yep. You have to, you don't have to be a sole owner. So let's say that, 4 of you started an entity together. At least one of the owners, it's what we call a principal member. One of the owners has to be licensed to qualify that entity to get a license, because an entity can't sit through my class. So if I start a corporation tomorrow and I wanted to call it, Chauncey is Awesome Real Estate, I could then turn around and say, okay, well, I've created this new entity, and I go to the commission, I say, because I'm a broker and I'm the owner of that entity, I want you to give a firm license to that entity. And so now when I do a real estate transaction, the commissions get paid to that entity directly, and then I would turn around and pay myself from that entity, as opposed to me, the real estate broker, getting paid directly. Yet again, main reason, tax benefits, liability coverage.
I have a quick question. We may end up hitting it, and if
Sure.
we do, just say we'll get it later. So, whereas a realtor or a broker for us, we have to continue continuing education. So the person that is under the firm still has to do all the same things with their license. It doesn't change anything just because you have a firm license.
Correct. Nothing changes just because you have a firm license. Now, I'll tell you this, Stephanie, because that's a very good question. You as the owner broker would have to maintain your license status in order for your firm to maintain their status. If you do anything that messes up your license, you have messed up your entity's license. So, but you don't have to do double the education, right? They're not going to be like, well, since you're 2 things, you have to do double the... They're not going to do that. As long as yours stays in good standing. Now, here's where it gets tricky, though, because you asked a really good question, and I'll tell you why. We have to renew our licenses every year. There's a fee to renew it. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. While the education is not doubled, you do have 2 licenses. So you have 2 to renew every year. That's double the cost.
In your name, and then one in the firm name.
There you go. There you go. Absolutely. Now, let me tell you about the other side of this, which is so confusing for students. But I'm going to do my darndest to try to help you out. There is this option where you are not utilizing a firm. It is called a sole proprietorship. Folks, I have a broker's license. And I told you, if you are a full broker, there are times that you can... Is somebody unmuted? Who just said what? If you are a full broker in North Carolina, I told you you can operate in a limited capacity independently. You do not need supervision for everything. There are certain things you can do. And so let's say that I am a full broker in North Carolina, because I am, and I wanted to go out and operate independently. I don't have a firm. I just want to operate as Seth Chauncey Real Estate Broker. I can. That is called a sole proprietorship. I am operating a brokerage business, but it is passing through me, a person. A sole proprietorship never needs a firm license because you haven't created an entity. I just woke up one day and said, I'm going to do real estate brokerage through me. And I can do that because I have a broker's license. Sole proprietorship is not, cannot, will not, ever need a firm license. Because it has a broker's license. It is a people. It's that same example where I said, you go and you tell your neighbor, I'll walk your dog for $100. You just created a business that's passing through you where you maintain all liability. I can do the same thing with my broker's license. I can go up to you and say, I can help you buy houses. I can do this. I can do that. I see you, Adriana. I just was trying to finish my rant there. What you got?
But you can have an LLC, right?
If I have an LLC, I can't be called a sole proprietor.
Yes.
Correct. So it's pick one. I can either get an entity and operate a firm, or I could not have an entity and operate as a sole proprietorship.
Yes. So if you one day decided to leave HBW to open your own LLC, you can do that, right?
Correct. But I would create the entity with the Secretary of State. I would have to turn around and file for a firm license with the Real Estate Commission. So now I'd have that firm license so it can operate. And I would also have to designate a BIC because 99.9% of the time, a firm can't exist without a broker in charge to affiliate licensees under it or to allow it to do certain things. And that's going to make more sense in just a second.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Beth, what would be the advantage of doing a sole proprietorship over one of the others?
Easier. There's no legal paperwork. There's no entities. There's no additional filings. Everything passes through you. Disadvantages, you maintain all the liability, and you don't have all the same tax benefits. But, sometimes it is what it is. So let me make a couple more powerful statements as we lead into the next piece of this, okay? If you are and I'm sorry, Adriana, is your hand just up from before? It's fine. Yeah, it's okay. It's all right. Remember yesterday when I said it's going to happen? I told you it was going to happen, right? It's okay. So let me make something abundantly clear. When you get your license and you go and you affiliate with a broker in charge and or a firm, because you're going to be provisional, and the only way to activate your license is to have supervision. An affiliated broker is not a sole proprietorship. A sole proprietorship is somebody who can operate independently. If you are affiliated with a firm or a BIC, you are either a licensee of a sole proprietorship that doesn't have a firm, or you are a licensee of a firm. That's what we like to call you. An affiliated licensee. Jacob asked am I lagging for anyone else?
No, not for me.
Nope. Sweet. It's not my internet connection, so I never know. I'm just like, fingers crossed it's not me. Now, here's the doozy, folks. Okay? Understand that a sole proprietorship does not have to be only one person. And understand that an entity does not have to be many people. Let me explain. Folks, until I took over HPW Real Estate School, I was a sole proprietor. And I operated completely and utterly independently. And I could do everything that a real estate firm can do because I myself am a broker in charge. And I'm going to expand on that in a moment. But what that means is, if I was a sole proprietor that was a broker in charge, I don't have a firm, I'm operating under my broker's license, and I'm on broker in charge status. The second that every single one of you got your licenses, in theory, I could affiliate you with me, and me, Seth Chauncey, broker in charge, sole proprietor, I would be supervising you. And so your licenses would be active. And so you would be affiliated licensees of a sole proprietorship. It all is technically as a business running through me, but I can have 20 of you under me. So you see how it's not just me by myself. Sole proprietorship doesn't necessarily mean just one person. It means an entity hasn't been created. Jacob says, do you need to be a BIC to be... At first I was like, it's like a vampire thing. Do you have to be bitten to be a sole proprietor? Like you get bitten one day and then you wake up as a sole proprietor? Yeah, I knew you meant BIC. Not every time. I've got to get into some more details. Hang tight. What you got, Dora?
So in essence, you are a sole proprietorship from a tax standpoint, but not from the real estate standpoint. But you need to be a BIC in order to have brokers under you, right?
You have to be a broker in charge to have anybody affiliated under you. You do not have to be a broker in charge to kind of go back to Jacob's point to be a sole proprietor as long as you don't want other people under you. You're going to get some more details on that in just a second. Now, let me flip the switch here. If I go out and I create Awesome Brokers LLC, and I ain't got no friends, and I'm the owner of Awesome Brokers LLC, and I get a firm license for Awesome Brokers LLC, it is an entity. It is a firm. It's one person. Just because we call it a firm does not mean there's 1,000 people. Just because we call it a sole proprietorship does not mean there's one person. Does that make sense for everybody? You will need to look at details within a question to understand exactly what you're dealing with. Details matter. So let me make sure that you're following with me here, okay? I'm going to skip forward for 1 second. I want you to look at this guy right here. Tell me if this fine gentleman is a sole proprietor or a firm.
Can't.
Can't tell.
You can't tell.
Depends.
Adult diapers. That's right. Depends. Depends on some other things, right? That you don't know in this picture. How about this group of lovely people?
It could be either.
But still can't tell.
Still can't tell. Do you see how that works? Do you see why that's so important to understand? Now let me tell you why this can really screw you up on the North Carolina portion of the test. When we get into a later concept dealing with agency, there are going to be certain rules into things like dual agency and designated dual agency. Well, designated dual agency is impossible with only one licensee. So if we had a firm that was one person, designated dual agency is possible. If we had a sole proprietorship with one person, designated dual agency is impossible. If we had a sole proprietorship with 70 people, designated dual agency is possible. If we had a firm with 70 people, designated dual agency is possible. It's not the firm or sole proprietorship that is necessarily going to answer this agency question. It's going to be more details like how many members, how many people, and what are their statuses, and all these other things that will come into play some more in just a second. So you've got to be able to understand kind of what I mean when I say broker or firm. Broker is what we call a people with a license given by the Real Estate Commission. Firm is what we call an entity with a license given by the Real Estate Commission. It doesn't tell us how many in any way, shape, and form. It just tells you that one has a legal entity and one does not. Are you having fun yet? Isn't this great? Oh, yeah. It's good information, but it's...
Before I started my own company.
Yeah, well, you know. It's super informative. What you got, Adriana?
So, if you are a sole proprietorship, and if you don't have any affiliated licensees under you, so you do not need to be a broker in charge. Is that right?
Under most circumstances. I can't give you a... Remember when I said we don't deal in a whole lot of absolutes. So Jacob asked a similar question. I can't give you an absolute answer yet because you don't understand enough yet. Hang tight on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. North Carolina. Whew. North Carolina is fun. That's why I said buckle up, buttercups. There's all the, listen, there are no absolutes. I mean, there's like 2 absolutes, but everything else is depends, which is why my favorite answer to every real estate question, right, Eliza, is adult diapers. It depends. Okay, it depends. That's right. So, to get technical, folks, if we're saying sole proprietorship, more often than not, that means multiple people because it's just passing through a sole proprietor. If we say sole proprietor, that is just the one. But I still wouldn't trust that on a test. They will need to give you more details. But just so, for that point of clarity, sole proprietor does typically contextually mean the one person. Sole proprietorship means all the people who are flowing through that sole proprietor. But like I said, it's just not enough. And so we already talked about this. The big differentiation here is one is a person with a broker's license. One is a entity with a firm license. And so these are all just visuals that I've already told you. Remember, I told you I'm not a slide reader. They're there. I'm going to share them with you, but I'm not a slide reader. So a lot of times when they pop up on the screen, I've already told you everything you need to know. Just like this one as well. The only difference is, in a firm, the company gets paid. So proprietor, the individual, gets paid. And remember, if you are in a broker affiliated with one or the other, right, you are not a sole proprietor. You are an affiliated licensee of a sole proprietorship, or you are an affiliated licensee of a real estate brokerage firm. Here's our friends again. So here is the other thing that you asked about, Jacob, and I said hang tight, okay? The LNCL, folks. It is kind of one of the more unique categories in North Carolina. I don't think it's incredibly testable because it is such a rare concept. I mean, I have never met anybody utilizing this. Now, to be fair, I'm also not in commercial real estate brokerage. But the LNCL is, and you're going to see what I mean in future concepts. There are so many things that when you read it, you're like, oh, this must be that. And then when I explain it to you, you're like, oh, that wasn't that at all. Right, there's some names that are very misleading. This is not. The limited non-resident commercial license. Folks, if you didn't know this, there are a lot of top dogs in commercial development that go all throughout the country. There are some very big names. And so they develop throughout the entire country. They go to multiple states. And even more than that, if you don't know about these top dogs in commercial development, you probably do know about Target, Starbucks, your favorite stores. Okay, they probably have a land acquisitions department at their corporate office. It would not make sense for that individual person to have 50 licenses for 50 states. And so what this basically is it gives the right to somebody who is actively licensed in another state to come into our state as long as they meet certain criteria and be given a temporary license that allows them to transact commercial real estate only. So this is the kind of the only one that kind of is in a different category all on its own out of everything. And so the things that are required is what we call a declaration of affiliation with a resident broker. There has to be somebody in North Carolina who supervises them. Because if they're coming from Michigan, where it's very different, they can't just come in willy-nilly. So they basically have to find another broker in North Carolina and say, will you watch me and make sure I don't mess up? And so it's called a declaration of affiliation and a cooperation agreement. Now, folks, a cooperation agreement just outlines how compensation is going to flow, right? Are we sharing money on the deals? How is it going to go? How are we cooperating together? How are they going to be compensated? And then the resident broker is responsible for maintaining the records, maintaining trust accounts. We'll talk more about trust accounts in a little bit. And, just overseeing the whole transaction. So very specific license, an LNCL, limited non-resident commercial license. If you live in North Carolina, they will not give you this. This is only for people who do not live here. And they do have to be actively licensed in another state. That being said, oh, go ahead, Stephanie.
Okay, so you might end up doing this. So if you get a limited non-resident commercial license for the state of North Carolina, say I lived in Utah, is that good for just one time, or is it good for a year, or how does that work?
Yeah, we're going to talk about this. Every license in North Carolina expires every single year, and you would have to go through a process to get it renewed every single year. And so if they were here for longer than a year, they would have to renew it. Otherwise, if they got done with the job and left and it expired, they would just let it be expired until they needed it again and have to go through the process again. Yeah. That being said, folks, go take a break. Time flies when we're talking about this crazy stuff, huh? Cool. So let's keep going with some more conversations to wrap up the evening, okay? We have been talking about a lot, and it's already all exceptionally testable material. Now, it's not going to be the only time you hear it. We will circle back around to some more topics within this. So let me dive deeper into some of the things I've already mentioned. All right. Let's start going back into the greater detailed portion of the different licensing statuses. We just talked about the LNCL, very specific to North Carolina. Other states may have it, but of course this is a special license in North Carolina, as I just said, and it is exactly what it sounds like. But provisional is where this all begins. And so when you go through this class and you get your license issued in North Carolina, I told you it will be issued on this status. Now, it is also issued on another status as well, and that is inactive. So remember, I told you you can't do anything with your license until you have supervision. Well, that is the difference between inactive versus active. In order to use any broker's license in North Carolina, it has to be two things: current and active. And so the way that I want you to think of current, and you're going to see this again in a second, is currency. You have to pay to renew your license every year. And as long as you renew your license, paying that currency will keep your license current. So a current license is one that is up to date on payment. If you fail to pay those expenses, your license goes expired. See how that works? Currency keeps you current. Failure to pay those expenses will make you expired. Now, I'm going to give you a few scenarios in there, but that's where it's important to understand. Your license will be issued on provisional, meaning you're a baby broker. You need supervision, but you cannot activate your license until you get that supervision. So while your license is issued technically current, because when you pay the application fee, that's paying for the first time, it will be current and inactive. Okay? Current and inactive. And the only status that allows you to actually do real estate in North Carolina is current and active. So current and inactive means you can't do nothing. What you got, Justin?
Is there like a grace period if it does expire, where you just automatically have to go back to taking classes?
Excellent question. Hang tight. There is a grace period. They do not. I mean, there's punishment for letting it go expired, but it's not as severe as sit back with Seth for 80 hours. Okay, like it's not that mean. All right. But we'll get into the punishments in just a second. There is a punishment for letting it go expired. There are punishments for letting it go inactive as well. The only time there's no punishment for it being inactive is when it's first issued. The punishment is you just can't use it until you have supervision, okay? So every single license who goes through the standard licensing process in North Carolina is issued on provisional status. You need training wheels, you need supervision before you can activate your license. And all it takes to move from a provisional broker's license to a full broker is 18 months of post-licensing. That's it. So that's what I'm telling you. You can move from a provisional broker to a full broker really fast if you want to take that education really fast. But let me explain something. I told you in the states on the national test that have salespersons, you can be a salesperson forever. North Carolina, you can only be a provisional broker and play real estate, as I like to call it, for 18 months. So let me paint a picture for you. Okay? Who have I not picked on today? Sandeep. Sandeep goes and he gets his license after passing this class. And Sandeep turns around and he comes and he's like, Seth, I want to work for you. I say, great, Sandeep, come on. And he affiliates with me. So if I'm Sandeep's broker in charge, Sandeep's license is now active. So he's got a current and active license, which means he can go out and sell houses. Everybody okay with that statement? He's still provisional, but he is current and active, which allows him to do real estate. So he goes out and he sells $7 million in real estate. And he's so busy selling real estate that it's now been 18 months from the day he got his license. And just like that, his license is on inactive status again. That's what I mean whenever I say that you can only be provisional for 18 months. So it's either become full broker in 18 months or stop doing real estate in 18 months. Your choice. So if Sandeep gets his post-licensing classes done prior to 18 months, his license will remain on active status, and now he is a full broker still affiliated with me, and he just keeps on keeping on. But if he goes over that 18-month deadline, he goes back to inactive. Now, folks, the only thing that is required of Sandeep to reactivate, take his post-licensing classes. He can't reactivate now as a provisional broker, but he can as a full broker. Does that make sense? That 18 months is your one-time entry 18 months. It's either remedy it in 18 months or the only way you can be active is as a full broker. So let me just replay that scenario. Sandeep gets his license. For 2 years, he's paying his money, but he doesn't take post-licensing. He doesn't do anything with it. He can activate his license, but it's going to require him to get all of his post-licensing done in one fell swoop before he can activate it. And it's going to require him to get some continuing education done, because post-licensing is one time as long as you don't mess up to move from provisional to full broker. But then continuing education is another set of educational criteria that happens every single year until the day you die.
On that happy note, quick question. So I thought that after the 18 months that if you didn't move from provisional broker to a full broker, that you had to retake this initial 80-hour course.
Nope.
Is that incorrect?
That's incorrect.
Okay. And then, so when you are a full broker, once you've completed your extra 90 hours, I believe it was, within that 18-month time frame, once you're a full broker, the only thing that your license can do is end up running out of current status, correct? It's not going to go inactive for any reason.
It's not going to go inactive for post-licensing, but remember I just said continuing education comes into play. Remember the day you die thing? Yeah, that cheery thing I said? There's a second set of education that never goes away. And it's kind of like if you were a nurse, kind of like if you were, you've got continuing education for certain licenses to keep the sword sharp, as they say. So we're going to talk about what that kicks in and what that looks like in just a second. So in theory, you take post-licensing once and it's a done deal. Now, you can screw up so bad that you can end up having to take post-licensing again. You can screw up so bad that ends up having to take pre-licensing again, but there are very specific triggers. Very specific triggers for those. So we're going to build up to those in just a second. So provisional status, go ahead.
So the easiest way to kind of say that is pretty much that to have your license be current, it just means that you have to renew it. To have your license be active, it means you have to be up to date in your current education.
There you go. And except for like a provisional broker, because you could in theory be up to date on your education, but you can't be active unless you have a broker in charge. So special, it's a little bit more special for that provisional broker. But in general, education keeps you active, currency keeps you current. And you have to be both current and active to play real estate. There you go. So as I said, you are a newly licensed broker. Your license will be issued on provisional status. Furthermore, it will be issued on inactive status. And so this is an introductory place that you come in as. And now, folks, this is just, let me just paint a picture for you here. You can't do any real estate brokerage on inactive status. Yeah, you have a license. Yeah, you can hang it on your wall. Yeah, you can be proud of it. But you can't do anything with it. Now, I'm going to pick on people. Do you think the commission's ever going to come after these people that I'm about to joke about? No, but just for funsies, I'm going to show you something or tell you something. If you get your license in the mail and you're so excited about it, but you haven't picked a firm yet, and you haven't affiliated yet, and you take a picture of it and you post it on Facebook and you say, you're looking at the newest licensed real estate broker in North Carolina. Well, you just advertise brokerage services. You can't do that as an inactive licensee. Only an active licensee on current status can do real estate, and advertisements falls into that. Now, as I said, the commission is not going to throw the book at you for getting excited about having a license, but it is technically a violation of license law because you're not legally allowed to do real estate. So a provisional broker activates their license by getting somebody to hold their hand. I like to call it Mommy and Daddy Bick. You are the baby broker and you need Mommy and Daddy to hold your hand and teach you how to not go to real estate jail, as we like to call it. So once you have somebody who's supervising you, they will activate your license. There is a form they fill out with the Real Estate Commission called the Broker Activation and Affiliation Form. Now here's the cool thing. The day they fill out that form, you're allowed to go out and sell a house. In theory. Of course, there's a lot of like build-up stuff, like learning how to use the multiple listing service and, generating leads. But in theory, you're active at that point as soon as they hit that form and submit it, and you can play real estate. Now, there is a nuance to the rule. It says when they fill that form out and activate your license, you can go out and do real estate because you're an active broker. However, you should receive written notice from the Real Estate Commission within 30 days confirming your agency status with this firm or BIC. And if you have not, then you must cease and desist and inquire as to why you haven't gotten a written notice in the mail. We'll talk more about that one later. That's kind of an advanced topic. So, affiliating with a BIC is how you activate a provisional license. Moving a provisional license to a non-provisional status, right? Or a full broker status, or just a broker status. Folks, I like to tell everybody in these licensing classes, everybody's favorite breakfast cereal from today on is called Synonym Toast Crunch, okay? Synonym meaning words that mean the same. There are a lot of synonyms. So every single day I'm going to be feeding you big old bowls of Synonym Toast Crunch. And that is non-provisional, full broker, and broker are all synonyms. They mean the exact same thing. So the only thing it takes to move from provisional to full broker, 90 hours of post-licensing. There are 3 post-licensing classes, 301, 302, 303. 301 is broker relationships and responsibilities. 302 is contracts and closings. And 303 is NC laws, rules, and legal concepts. You can take them in any order. There's no particular order, even though it sounds like you would need to take one before the other. Nope. You just, as soon as you get your license issued, you just find it, you sign up for it, you can start taking them. And as soon as you get all 3 of them knocked out, you are no longer a baby broker, you are a full broker.
How often are those classes offered?
We have typically all 3 of them every month, so they're pretty often. So, I mean, basically, within a month, you could have all 3 knocked out under normal circumstances. During CE season, we drop down to like 2 a month, but they're offered pretty often. Yeah. What you got, Tim?
Is there any, I would say, testing, testing that need to be done?
Yeah.
Those post-licensing classes?
Excellent question. The question is there any testing for the post-licensing courses? The answer is yes. However, it is way easier. We write the test for post-licensing, and you take it in class with us. There is no formal testing facility. There is no, legal process. There's no background checks. It's hang out, listen to everything I have to teach you about doing good stuff in real estate, and then take a test. You know what the pass rate on those post-licensing classes are for us, Tim? 99.999999999%, okay? You really just have to hate my guts and not listen to a word I have to say in order to not pass those. And to tell you what, I'll teach you all the good stuff too. It's not just about textbook anymore. I teach you real world stuff, folks. My post-licensing classes are the bee's knees. Keep that in mind for when you get your license. I'll teach you the real world stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. Jacob says most of them you can do at your own pace as well. Yeah, I don't recommend it because most of the at your own pace courses are garbage. Most people attempt them. They're so bad they can't pass them, or they learn nothing, and then they end up having to retake them in person. So I wouldn't recommend wasting your money unless you're just in a really big crunch and have to get them done, because the vast majority of students who take those end up back in this class, and like the post licensing via Zoom like this, because they can't pass it asynchronous. Some people can, but you're right, they are available. So I told you, you activate your license and it will continue to be active even as a provisional broker up till that 18 months. If you do not move to full broker within 18 months, your license falls back to inactive. And the only way that you can bring it back to life or reactivate it is get your post-licensing done. There is no crazy punishment, right? That's a very big misconception, is that, oh, you have to go back to pre-licensing because you didn't get it done in 18 months. No. However, be aware. Listen, okay, Jacob, nobody needs that kind of negativity in their life. Missy said I did on my post license with HPW back in 2000, and Jacob said I was 2 in 2000. Shots fired, Jacob. Shots fired.
No, not two, -2.
-2. That's even worse. You just put salt on the wounds, Jacob. Salt on the wounds. I just read it as 2. -2. Lord have mercy. I'll tell you what my buddy says whenever he sees us hear stuff like that. He's like, oh man, I remember my first beer. That was a long time ago. Yeah, -2. Well, at least
Yeah, my first beer.
Legally.
My first legal beer was 3 months ago.
I was about to say that was very recently, right? Yep. Yeah, there you go. Lord have mercy. That's right. Monica's like, yeah, hold on. Where's the remove from meeting button? Hold on. Remove. No, I'm kidding. Look, you get points for enjoying the classic music, and you knew the Brady Bunch, Jacob. So I'll give credit where credit is due. So it's all good. Listen, once upon a time, we were all the youngest in the room as well. Let Jacob enjoy his moment, right? Let Jacob enjoy his moment. So, yeah, there you go. Old soul. That's good. Now, folks, here's the dangerous thing about post-licensing. Sam just brought the Britney Spears back into it. That was back before she was crazy. Okay, her old music. Gotta give them the good stuff. The post-licensing courses, if you don't get them all knocked out and move to a full broker, they expire after 2 years. So let's say that you get your license, you take 2 of the 3, you go inactive because you didn't get the 3rd one finished, and then you said, screw it, I'm just going to wait to take the 3rd one. And you wait 2 years. Well, you can fix it as long as you've been paying your money, but you have to retake all 3 post-licensing classes because the 2 that you did take without finishing them expired. They got deleted. So they are only good from 2 years from the date you took them if you didn't knock them all out. So that is an important thing, both for real world and could potentially be testable as well. Now, as I keep saying, a provisional broker has to have supervision. They cannot, in any way, shape, and form, go out and do anything on their own. So they have to activate and get supervision under a broker in charge. Now, here's a note. that I would wager is probably, potentially, maybe testable. It's such a weird concept, but the way that the test is written nowadays, it could be. When we're dealing with, I'm going to use the term again, affiliated licensee. It's what it means to be under somebody's supervision, to be part of something. Okay, so you can be affiliated with a firm, you can be affiliated with a sole proprietor. In this context, we're just saying you've got a broker in charge. Could be either, right? Firm or sole proprietor. Well, there's a concept called dual affiliation. So let me give you an example of what dual affiliation was. If I, for some reason or another, found a way to be affiliated with a Coldwell Banker office and a Keller Williams office at the same time, that is what we would call dual affiliation. A provisional broker cannot be duly affiliated with two BICs and or two firms simultaneously. Except, have any of you ever heard of a real estate team? Yeah. It is a very common concept nowadays for real estate. So it's not uncommon for people to have teams that are under a firm umbrella. So the awesome agents team of ABC Realty. Well, if that team, and we're going to talk more about this later, there are some times where a team is legally required to have an entity created and a firm license. And because of that, they would also need a BIC. We're going to get more on that in a second. A provisional broker can be duly affiliated if and only if it is with the firm office BIC and the team firm BIC that are located in the same physical office location that are doing deals together. Now, that is a very oddly specific thing, and I promise it will come back up again later. But that is one special exemption for a provisional broker. Otherwise, they cannot be duly affiliated. So let me circle back around. I can be duly affiliated as a full broker. The only thing it requires as a full broker to have multiple affiliations is just verbal permission from your broker in charge. Now, in the example I gave earlier, Coldwell Banker, Keller Williams, they're not going to allow that. Why? If they're on the same block, that's direct competition. So why would anybody allow that? But what this allows us to do is, let's say that I wanted to be in a Keller Williams office at the beach for some reason, and a Coldwell Banker office in the Triangle. In theory, I could do that as long as my BIC said it was okay. And since they're not in direct competition, they're probably not going to care. Does that make sense? A full broker can be duly affiliated as long as the BIC say it's okay. A provisional broker cannot be duly affiliated except in that one very specific exemption. Team BIC, firm BIC, or office BIC in the same physical office location.
Seth, would that, I'm going to use Coldwell as an example because this is who my husband works for, so it's who I have context with.
Sure.
So let's say it is HPW Coldwell Banker here in the Triangle and Sea Advantage on the coast.
Seacoast Advantage, yeah.
Seacoast Advantage, thank you. Could you be affiliated with both, or is this because they're the same umbrella? I'm going to call it an umbrella company with Coldwell. How does that work?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. Now, this is advanced stuff, okay? Everybody take a deep breath and just remember that Kirsten asked the question, okay? So if you don't like it and you're traumatized, y'all just remember who to blame after, okay? The question is, well, could you be duly affiliated with like Coldwell Banker, HPW, which is a big real estate brokerage firm in the Triangle, and Coldwell Banker, Seacoast Advantage? Here's the thing. Coldwell Banker is a franchise. It is no different than McDonald's. It is no different than Burger King. It is no different than, if you have enough money and you meet a criteria, you can open up a Coldwell Banker office tomorrow. You just have to buy the rights to call yourself a Coldwell Banker office. That being said, Coldwell Banker Seacoast Advantage and Coldwell Banker HPW are both part of the same umbrella franchise, but they are different brokerage firms. Every single Keller Williams office is different than every other one. And then Coldwell Banker HPW has 14 offices. All of those 14 offices are actually the same firm. But Coldwell Banker Advantage versus Coldwell Banker Seacoast Advantage versus Coldwell Banker HPW, those are all different firms. Yeah. And so to circle back around to the actual question, could you be duly affiliated? Yes, if the BIC said it was okay. But technically, because they are different firms, they're still in competition. But if it's at the Coast and the Triangle, there's really no competition there, right? Because HPW doesn't do business at the Coast. We're in the Triangle only, right? Yeah. So legally, yes, but even though they're both blue, they're not on the same team, right? It's kind of like the Super Bowl. Both the teams are red, but they're not on the same team, right? 49ers and the Chiefs, both kind of reddish, but not the same team. So let me tell you one of the most mind-blowing things of the night, okay? And the good news is we're winding down, okay? We got just 30 minutes left. You've been asking a lot of fantastic questions, and you weren't ready to hear some of them, and I kept kind of putting it off, and I kept saying depends, and I kept saying... So when you become a full broker, also called a non-provisional broker, I said a broker can operate independently. But in a very limited capacity. As soon as you take your 90 hours of post-licensing and you move from a provisional broker to a non-provisional broker, you have the ability to activate your license without a broker in charge. And you have the ability to do some real estate transactions without a broker in charge. Now, let me tell you something very important about this. All you are allowed to do is help buyers and collect referral fees, specifically from people who already know you are a real estate broker. And here's why. If you are not a broker in charge, nor do you have a broker in charge, you are not allowed to do 3 things ever. Advertise, have a trust account, and affiliate other brokers. So I want you to paint that picture in your head. Yes, you have a license. Yes, you're a full broker. Yes, you can activate your license. But folks, think about it. How useful is your license if you're not allowed to advertise your services in any way, shape, and form? When I say no advertising, you can't pass out business cards. You can't have a website, no Facebook page, no word of mouth. So now do you see what I'm saying when I said, yeah, you can activate your own license. Yeah, you can operate independently as a sole proprietor. But for all intents and purposes, it's worthless in North Carolina. The only things you can really do without a broker in charge, without an affiliation as a full broker, is assist people who know that you're a broker. I'm going to say that again. Assist people who know you are a broker in buying and collecting referral fees from people who know you're a broker. And so if you're a brand new broker who has never actually had the right to advertise, how is anybody going to know that you're a broker? So when you get test questions on whether or not you can operate independently, yes, but in this very limited capacity. Now, let me give you some real world advice, folks. I don't care that you legally can activate your license on your own. Don't you ever do it. You need to work under a firm. You need to learn the good, the bad, the ins, the outs, the yeses, the nos. If you do not, you will get sued immediately and you will lose your license. There is so much information. You need supervision. The 3 no's, Jacob, are no advertising brokerage services in any way, shape, and form, no maintaining a trust account, and no affiliating other licensees. A broker in charge is required to do all of those. Now let me circle back around to what I told you. Last year, I operated as a sole proprietor. And I could do all 3 of those things. Remind me, why?
Because you are a BIC.
Because I am a PIMP. Oh, wait. I'm sorry, BIC. Whatever he said. Yeah, BIC. See the difference? So while you can potentially operate independently as a full broker, most people still stay affiliated with a brokerage firm. Because in order to actually do your business, you would have to have a BIC or be a BIC. Now, spoiler alert, you have to have at least 2 years of full-time experience to be a BIC. So not a single one of you will qualify to be a BIC in the beginning. You can be a full broker in a matter of weeks. But if you can't do anything with it, what's the point? Right? You're going to be affiliated with the firm anyway. Now, the other question I get... Go ahead. Say it again.
Does your time in as a provisional broker, does that count?
It's a fantastic question. So the question that Jacob asks is, does your time as a provisional broker count towards that 2 years of experience? The answer is absolutely yes, so long as you were active and so long as you were doing real estate. So let's say that in that example I just said earlier with Sandeep, right? Sandeep is a provisional broker. He comes to work for me. Sandeep does $7 million worth of real estate in his time as a provisional broker. And just before his 18th month, he finishes his post-licensing, so he gets to stay active. Sandeep only needs 6 more months of brokerage activity before he can be a BIC himself, because he's already got 18 months of experience. Excellent question.
Question, is there an amount, you said 2 years, so like for example, if I sell a home a year, is there like a transaction amount for you to be a BIC?
Y'all are a sharp group because y'all are asking some really good questions. I would say some of them a little early, but I'm still willing to answer these. No, it's fine. Don't apologize for that. Folks, don't ever take offense if I say it's too early, because we'll get there, but I'll answer it now. Folks, here's the deal. The criteria for being a broker in charge is 2 years of full-time experience in the past 5 years. And so this is a double whammy. I'm going to answer both questions. Jacob's question was, do they have to be consecutive? No. Just 2 years within the past 5 years. Don't have to be consecutive. And so then Dora's question was, well, what if you do like a sale a year? Okay, here, I'm going to answer your question with a question. How much do you think would be required to constitute full-time as a real estate broker? Because it's very specifically articulated as full-time. What would make you a full-time broker?
Well, I'm just throwing it out there. 52 weeks a year, maybe 52 homes.
52. Well, I wish we could sell 52 homes in a year. That's a lot. You'd be a multimillionaire if you could do 52 homes a year. I mean, people do it. I mean, that's just a lot for one person. Let me take this a step further. Okay, you ready for this? I'm going to answer the question I asked you with another question. You ready for this? I want you to listen to this question very carefully, because this is the answer to what constitutes full-time. Very important. You ready? What do you get when you mix an elephant and a rhino?
An elephino.
A helifino.
A wuzzle.
Was that from Winnie the Pooh?
No, do you not know what a wuzzle is?
I remember the heffalumps and woozles from Winnie the Pooh. What the hell's a wuzzle?
A wuzzle was two different animals that were mixed together, like an elephant room was an elephant and a kangaroo. They were toys when I was a little girl.
Oh, there you go.
That means you're young too.
Maybe. Folks, here's the thing. The Real Estate Commission has not defined what full-time is. However, do understand that they ask you to tell them what your experience is. So they want to know where you were active. They want to know where you were affiliated. They want to know what your sales volume was. So they do ask questions. But basically they say, well, if you think you were full-time, tell us you were full-time. And we'll look at it and we'll tell you if we agree or not. And so the way that the rule is articulated, it's 2 years of full-time experience within the past 5 years or 4 years of part-time experience within the past 5 years. So I don't know the answer because I've actually called the commission, or one of my students has, and asked, and they said, I don't know. You tell us what you think and we'll tell you. Now, folks, I want you to stop everything for a second. And I want you to listen to me. And this is another one of those life's not fair moments, but don't take it too hard because it's just nothing you could have done about this. As I'm sitting here teaching you folks on January 30th of 2024, everything that I'm teaching you is 1,000% correct. I promise. I'm pretty smart. However, the Real Estate Commission has been taking a very deep dive into the laws and rules in regard to being a broker in charge. And I would bet a lot of money that there will be amendments to the laws and rules on the requirements. And I don't know if that's going to make them more strict or less strict. So please understand that after you get your license, we typically have laws and rule changes around July. So it could be that you sit in one of my post-licensing classes in July and I have to be like, oh yeah, remember when I said it was only 2 years? It's now 4 years of full-time experience because they changed it. Like, don't call me a liar if they change it and you sit in my class. These laws and rules do change. And it is something they're very heavily looking at. Now, for the sake of this class, it doesn't matter because it's not going to change your test in any way, shape, and form. And I told you the main focus is your test. I just like to give you enough information for you to not feel like I'm leaving anything out. I'd rather you have too much information as long as it doesn't screw you up on the test. There is a grace period before they will change the exam. So even if the exam changes, it won't change anything for you. So yeah, it'll be a long time before that stuff makes it into the exam. They kind of warn us about that stuff. But I just want to be honest with you because right now, like some of you are like, oh, 2 years, that's not that long. And then if you like come into post-licensing and it's like 12 years and you're like, Seth said it was only 2. Yeah, that's because at the time I'm telling you this, it is only 2. But these rules do change and it's not going to be 12 years. Nobody panic. No. And I'm sorry, I didn't answer your other question. Is there an advantage to completing your post-licensing courses quickly? Yes, but there is, arguably an advantage to waiting as well. I'll tell you the advantage for getting them done quickly. You're done. Move on with your life. Most people who get into real estate are very slow in the beginning and then they get busy. And then when you're busy is not the time that you want to have a deadline for classes to be done. So it's sometimes good to just knock them out while you're not really doing anything in real estate. The other advantage is I teach you really, really in-depth concepts from real-world experience that could absolutely help you in transactions above and beyond what the general public is teaching you. Why? Because I'm smarter than them. I'm just kidding. I'm not that cocky. Sometimes, maybe. I don't know. So there are advantages to taking them early. There's also arguably advantages to waiting a little bit because you're more likely to retain and understand everything I'm teaching you if you've had a little bit of experience under your belt. So that's the advantage to waiting. But I'm also, I explain it in a way where you'll be good either way. So yeah, folks, this is kind of an important thing. A full broker can operate independently, but it's kind of worthless. And so if I didn't say this already, the other big question that I always get asked, you ready for this? I'm going to have you answer this for me. The question is, a full broker who's a sole proprietor, can they list homes? I get that question a lot. You tell me.
Are they just a full broker?
No, they can't.
Yeah, if we're talking about just a full broker. Sole proprietor, full broker.
They're not a bank?
Not a BIC.
No.
Advertisement is part of the advertisement.
There you go, folks. See? God, y'all are learning so well already. Folks, How on God's green earth could you list a house for sale if you're not allowed to advertise? What, are you going to walk around like with telepathy telling people you got 123 Main Street listed? Doesn't work, does it? You can't sell a house without the ability to advertise. So no listings either. It's kind of worthless. I'll tell you why that this status really exists in North Carolina. I want you to picture this. You get into the business, you do it for 3 years, and you're like, I enjoy it, but it's really not where I thought it's not what I wanted it to be. So maybe you don't love it and you want to do something different. Well, don't let your license go. Just sit on active and current status by yourself without a firm, and you can collect referral fees. Even though you're not doing real estate anymore, you're not advertising, you've got 3 years worth of relationships that people may call you. And so when somebody calls you and says, hey, will you help me buy a house? You're like, oh no, I switched. I'm back at, in IT, but I still have my license. So I'll get you in contact with Corey, and Corey will take care of you, and that way you're in good shape. Well, you know what's going to happen? When Corey goes and helps them, Corey's going to send you a check for a few $1,000s. We call that mailbox money, folks. That's called a referral fee. Ain't nothing better than a few $1,000s of mailbox money, because you introduce two people, and you just walk outside and you open your mailbox. There's a check in there. You're going to go, success, right? That's the best. Money that you didn't have to do anything for. So that's why you might keep your license on active, full broker status without being affiliated. Because that check can and will come straight to you. You can be legally paid a referral fee. You're a broker. Make sense? So let's take a look at this question here. An application question. Which of the following would be a correct statement regarding a provisional broker in North Carolina?
C.
Getting some C's.
Yeah, C.
Another C. More C's in the chat. C. It is, in fact, C. Folks, the only one of these that is true is C. It says provisional brokers can become full brokers as fast as they want by taking the 90 hours of post-licensing. As soon as you get your license, you can take them as fast as you want to. The only rule is you cannot take classes that overlap each other. So you couldn't be sitting here and taking like 301 with me on this Zoom computer and then 302 at the same time on this Zoom computer and like looking back and forth. That's prohibited. But in theory, you could, take one in the morning, one at night, one in the morning, one at night, one in the morning. Get them knocked out fast. Yeah, the only one that probably tripped you up a little bit is D. Provisional brokers must wait until they are affiliated to take post-licensing. No. As soon as you get your license, you can sign up for post-licensing. You just have to have a license number. That's all it requires. You don't have to be active. You don't have to be affiliated. When I teach post-licensing, I have just as many affiliated licensees in there as I do unaffiliated licensees. It's up to you. If you want to get started and affiliate and learn stuff before you take post, great. If you want to get all your posts knocked out before you join a firm, great. I have opinions on which way is a better way to go, but, So last big thing we're going to get into tonight, okay? We're going to get into some of the deadlines that are very testable. So earlier I told you that post-licensing, as long as you don't mess up, is one time. Pre-licensing, as long as you don't mess up, is one time. Now, of course, there are triggers for when you have to take them again. And then after that, folks, we need to talk about some very important dates, okay? The Real Estate Commission runs on we'll call it a fiscal year or a licensing year. It runs from July 1 up to June 30th. So right now we are on the tail end, okay, leading up to June 30th of what I would call the 2023-2024 licensing year. It refers to the year it starts in and the year it ends in. So the current year started on July 1 of 2023. And everybody understands that the current licensing year ends on June 30th of this year, 2024. Is that statement okay for everybody? So here's the thing that you have to understand. There are very important deadlines that come into play, and then there are certain triggers that come into play. So when you all finish your class in March, let's say that every single one of you passes your exam in March, and you all get your license in March. That is called a license issuance. Unfortunately, folks, there is no prorated licensing year. So when you get your license in March, they will say, congratulations, here's your license. And then on June 30th, they'll say, pay your renewal fee. It doesn't matter that you just got your license. You have to renew every year. Okay, no proration. And remember that renewal fee, that is the currency that keeps you current. So every license is set to expire on June 30th, but it is reissued on July 1 as long as you paid your dues. So if you pay your, and it's $45, by the way, okay? It is $45 every single year. Sometimes I'll tell these classes it's $4,800 just to screw with them for like a second. And then they're like all panic about being here. They're like, it's just $45. That's
I was
it.
about to ask if, like, how much it was and if it would be, like, of our benefit to wait until July to take the test so that we didn't have to pay it, twice this year. And then you said it's $45. I was like, oh.
$45. Yep, not too bad. I will tell you there is a benefit to waiting till July, though. Hang tight on that. Don't do it, but there is a benefit. Hang tight. Okay, so June 30th, let's say you all get your licenses in March, you will have to pay your renewal fee by June 30th. If you do not pay it by June 30th, your license is expired on July 1st. Expired is not good. We're going to talk more about that in a second. Now, here's the other thing that you have to be aware of. Post-licensing, you have 18 months from the day you get your license. So presumably it'd be different for every single one of you. If you got your license on March 17th, you've got 18 months from the 17th of March. If you got your license on April 1st, you'd have 18 months from, April 1st. Post-licensing is going to be different for every single one of you. It's 18 months from whatever date is on your license. But continuing education kicks in for every real estate broker in North Carolina after their first renewal. So I want you to let that sink in for a second. If you get your license issued in April, you'll be renewing your license in June. And so now you have renewed your license once, which means now starting in the 2024-2025 licensing year, you've got to get continuing education done. Continuing education is comprised of 4 hours of update and 4 hours of elective. Now there is a different deadline date for that. It has to be completed by June 10th. So there's that perk I was talking about, Jacob. If you all get your licenses in March or April, that means that you will have to renew in June, $45, and you will have to take CE prior to June 10th of 2025. If you get your license issued sometime after July 1st, you will not have to take CE until June 10th of 2026, because you are not required to take it until you are in the second renewal year, or in other words, after you have renewed once. See, that's the advantage. But I still don't recommend waiting, because you want to hit the ground running with your real estate career. Just do it, because CE is not that bad. But it is a 4-hour update course and a 4-hour elective course. One last note, and then we'll talk more about this tomorrow when your brains have had a little more time to process everything I've already thrown at you, because I do like to give you a little bit of time to just ask me whatever for the last few minutes of class. But one last note here. What was it? Oh, June 10th and June 30th are the respective deadlines, okay? You cannot take CE after June 10th has passed. From June 11th to June 30th, there is a blackout period where we do not, cannot, and will not teach you CE. We're not allowed to. And so there is nothing you can do if you miss that June 10th deadline and you are required to get it done. There is nothing you can do to prevent from going inactive on July 1st due to an education deficiency. Your license will remain active through the licensing year of June 30th. But when the new licensing year hits, because you've had an education deficiency now, it is now inactive. Okay, remember, education is the difference between active versus inactive. And if you fail to pay your expenses by June 30th, that will make you expired. And the only way to play real estate in North Carolina is to have an active and current license. Excuse me. Now, I'll leave that slide up for a while. We'll talk about it a lot more, or I'll kind of add some more to it tomorrow. The thing is, there's just so much information that sometimes it's good for it to like process in your heads for a little bit. And so then when we start the class on the same thing, you've had more time to come up with any questions, any confusions, any things of that nature. And I can re-explain it to you when you're fresh, and I'll move into other topics. Now, I've only got a little bit more in like my introductory slides to go over. Don't panic, because these things do make a resurgence later. But once we finish the last few slides that deal with this, we will kind of derail and circle back around to where the syllabus starts. The syllabus starts with basic real estate concepts. So we'll start talking about things like real property, personal property, land, all of that stuff tomorrow, and start going from there. So what do you want to talk about for the last 7 minutes of class?
I got a question. The CE electives and updates, are those offered online, like Zoom classes?
Yep. Just like this. That's a good question. So, Tim, once upon a time, everything had to be taught in person before COVID, with the exception of an elective. That 4 hours of elective you see on my screen. When COVID hit, they made a really quick readjustment that they said they were trying to do anyway. And now absolutely every course that you could ever possibly need can be taken this way. We call this synchronous learning. We're all here at the same time, but we're separated by distance. That's called synchronous learning. And then asynchronous is what Jacob was talking about earlier, at your own pace courses, because you're separated by time and distance. Every course can also be taken as an asynchronous course legally. Not a good idea, with the exception of update. Update has to be taken at minimum synchronously or in person. They do not allow you to take an update at your own pace. And the update course changes every year. It's like the commission decides on topics. They roll it out to the public. I have to take a training course. All of us educators have to take training courses to then turn around and teach it to everybody else. So it changes every year. It's a new update course every year.
Is the update one the first 4 hours of CE? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, so it's just two different courses. So you would sign up for what's called a 4 hour, and I'm going to talk more about this tomorrow, but for if you are a provisional broker or a full broker who needs an update course, you sign up for what's called a Gen Up. If you're a BIC or BIC eligible broker who needs an update course, you sign up for BIC Up. So you just pick an update course that we're teaching. It's all the same course.
8 hours of CE, correct? And then the other course,
Yeah, the update is 4 of the 8 hours. And then the elective is 4 of the 8 hours. That's exactly right. Yep. And there are over 480 approved electives. So it's like find a class that interests you, sign up for it, that says elective.
All right, Seth, so we get our license in March, and let's just say we don't go active. June 10th comes and we don't take the CE. We wouldn't have to worry about anything. Is that right?
You will not have to worry about anything this year. Yeah. So you get your license in March. You do not have anything to do by June 10th. Okay. April, May, doesn't matter. You don't have anything to do by June 10th. But no matter what, you will still have to pay $45 by June 30th. The only thing that they do is kind of like what Jacob was saying. If you were to pass your test like around June 15th, they're not going to issue your license that close unless you call and beg them to, and then you're going to have to turn around and pay the $45. They're basically going to call you and they're going to say, hey, we're not going to issue any licenses during this blackout period time. And so they'll just say, we're going to issue your license on July 1. So if you're really close to the cusp, they won't issue it. They'll make you wait.
All right, so if we get our license in March and we activate them, we would have to take the CE by June 10th.
Nope. No, it's not about activation. It's about renewal. You will not have to take it until you renew your license the second time. CE is triggered by renewing. So once you renew the first time on June 30th of this year, starting on July 1 of 2024, you will be in your second renewal year, or meaning the year leading up to paying your second renewal. So you will all need, whether you activate or do not, if you get your license issued before June 30th, you will all have to take CE prior to June 10th of 2025. If you get your license issued,
You're active or inactive.
regardless of whether you're active or inactive.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Folks, how are we feeling so far, right? A lot of information already, isn't it? Good stuff, though, right? Feeling pretty good about it? What you got, Justin?
Yeah. I got a question. So when we get our provisional license and we go to a broker in charge, is the commission percentage different than someone who I guess is like a full broker, or?
Yes and no. The answer is typically yes, but it depends on the firm. Y'all are coming in at a time where there are 10,000 different brokerage models. Now, I will tell you this, Justin. Don't be so caught up on the brokerage split when you're brand new. And here's why. If you go to a firm that gives you a 90-10 split, meaning you get 90% of your commissions and they keep 10%, well, that's an exceptionally high split under most circumstances. But if they don't train you, they don't care about you, they don't coach you, and you never do any transactions, you know what 90% of zero transactions is? Nothing. You're broke. You ain't got no money. So what you need is a place who's going to train you, teach you. It's the proverbial teach a man to fish versus give a man a fish. It sounds great for me to tell you that I'm going to give you 100%, but if I don't teach you how to make any transactions, that does you no good. So there is a lot of different places you could go. And so there should always be some checks and balances between what your split is and what they're providing you in training and other resources. So even as a provisional broker, you could find a place that give you 100%. It's probably not going to be the best place for you as a provisional broker. You need coaching, you need training, you need all these different things. Yeah. Corey, learning a lot each night about real estate, right? It's pretty good stuff, isn't it?
Well, I did take in a lot I didn't know on the front end, though. So basically,
yeah, it's a lot.
Seeing it in person is one thing, but learning it behind the scenes is a whole different experience.
It absolutely is, right? And there is just so much more fun-filled information to come, folks, I promise. And I love talking about this stuff. So y'all are in a good place. Y'all are going to learn lots. That is if I even function tomorrow after being in the car for like 20 hours in 2 days and teaching. And see, what y'all don't see behind the scenes is I got all these monitors too. So I had to like set up all this computer equipment. I had to set up a camera to record the class so I can upload it for you. I got to take it all down. I just want y'all to know that I'm dedicated to making sure y'all succeed. So you're welcome.